Welcome to the 12th Annual Matilda White Riley Honors Awards. I'm going to do opening remarks from where I sit. Been on my feet most of yesterday, so it's nice to sit for a few minutes. I'm sure as well it's normal for the NIH. People are navigating all the processes and procedures to get on campus, so we'll have more people, I'm sure, arrive as we go along. But I wanted to get us started on time because we've got a packed full agenda. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Bill Riley, Director of the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research and Associate Director for Behavioral and Social Sciences here at the NIH. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 12th Annual Matilda White Riley Honor Awards. We have both, for 12 years, honored a distinguished lecturer who's had a career of work advancing the field and understanding the relationship of health and behavior. Once again, I won't spoil the fun for later when we introduce him, but it'll be great to have Mark Landingham here for that. We also have 5 awardees this year for whom we'll present in the Early Stage Investigator Awards. Great to have them as well, and I'll let Christine set that up later when we get to that point. I do want to make a few remarks about why this is the Matilda White Riley Awards, and it's not named after me or after my mother. Matilda White Riley was a distinguished researcher, teacher, mentor, who after a full career of doing that work at a time and an age where most of us would go, it's time to retire, decided instead that she would join at that time the fledgling National Institute of Aging to develop what was then one of the first divisions devoted to behavioral and social sciences. And that would have been enough in and of itself. But in addition to that, she also worked to coordinate the social and behavioral sciences across the other institutes and centers of the NIH. She advocated for those sciences in places where there wasn't a lot of research and a lot of interest at that time. This is back in the 1980s and early 1990s. She worked hard to communicate that science to a wealth of various stakeholders. She advised leadership on social and behavioral sciences and their relationship to the NIH. And she was instrumental in a report from the National Academies on Health and Behavior that ultimately created the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research. So it's quite appropriate that we honor her. She essentially did what OBSSR did before there was an OBSSR. And so it's great that every year we spend a few minutes to honor someone who put that much time and effort to put us on the right trajectory here at the NIH and focus on what we know are the key factors that are primarily responsible for health in this country. Social factors, behavioral factors, the very things that we tend not to think about in healthcare, but are critical to the type of work that we need to do and the ways we need to improve health in the country. I will stop there because I really want to hear from our early stage investigator paper awardees. I'm really looking forward to that. I'll steal a little bit of Christine's thunder to say that there were 500 applicants this year and a lot of papers to read to find 5 people that we thought exemplified the type of research that we'd like to see more of. So I will turn this over now, though, to Christine to introduce them and get us started.
So good morning. I'm Christine Hunter. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Behavioral and Social Science Research, and just very pleased to introduce the early stage investigators this morning. So as Bill said, it was a very competitive competition, and it's wonderful to see the next generation, kind of the innovative work they're doing, the innovative questions that they're asking. And so, can't wait to hear what your presentations are, but I've certainly read your papers and very excited to hear the talks. I do want to acknowledge and thank Bill Elwood, who is the person from our office who manages this competition, and it is a large task, as you can imagine. Soliciting, collating all those submissions, then getting the reviews for those submissions. And so with that, I also want to thank our NIH reviewers They reviewed, more than one person reviewed 500 papers to get to the 5 selections. So that is pretty outstanding. Bill does send his regrets, but I'm pleased to fill in for him. So for this session, I'm going to give a brief introduction of each of the speakers, and then I'm going to give each speaker 15 minutes for their presentation, and I'm going to ask that you hold your questions till the end. But you know what happens is sometimes people remember the sort of the recency effect, so and ask the last speaker question. So what I'd encourage you to do is write down your thoughts and questions as each speaker goes, so when we move to the panel, we can really engage the full panel of speakers. Let's see. For the sake of getting to the exciting stuff, which is their talks and not my presentation, I'm not going to read their full bio, but if you go online on our website, you'll see the full bios that we have there. There's also a copy of the bios in the back if you want to take a quick look at that. Let's see, there's also copies of the articles in the back if you want to take a copy with you or, just pick it up and look at it over the break. So without further ado, let me introduce our 5 awardees, although one can't be here. So Dr. Jamie Hansen, who's unable to present because he's got a concurrent presentation at another conference, but he's an assistant professor of psychology at the University of Pittsburgh. And his research focuses on the neural circuitry children and adolescents use to learn about different aspects of their environment, how such circuits are shaped by early life stress, so things like child poverty, maltreatment, and why neural changes due to this stress confer risks for negative outcomes. So his paper is titled "A Family-Focused Intervention Influences Hippocampal Prefrontal Connectivity Through Gains in Self-Regulation." So excellent paper, really encourage you to take a look at it and read it. The speakers we have here today are sitting in the front right here. Our first speaker is going to be Dr. Taylor Hargrove. She's an assistant professor of sociology, a faculty fellow at Carolina Population Center, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Dr. Hargrove's research program examines how and why social inequalities in health unfold across the life course, focusing on racial, ethnic, skin color, gender, and socioeconomic disparities. She's currently engaged in research that explores linkages among neighborhood contexts, individual level characteristics, and biological measures of health in early adulthood. The goal of this work is to elucidate how macro-level environments shape the relationships among social statuses and more proximate causes of poor health. Her paper is entitled "An Intersecting Social Inequalities in Body Mass Index Trajectories from Adolescence to Early Adulthood." She'll be followed by Dr. Olivia Lee. Dr. Olivia Lee is an assistant professor of social work department of children, youth, and families at the University of Southern California. So thank you for your long flight here. Coming to the West Coast and having to present early in the morning, I know is tough. Dr. Lee seeks to disentangle a complex relationship among socioeconomic status, adverse childhood experiences, and behavioral health, particularly substance use and its comorbid mental health during the life course and across generations. Her paper is entitled "Developmental Pathways from Parental Socioeconomic Status to Adolescent Substance Use, Alternative and Complementary Reinforcement." Dr. Lee will be followed by Dr. Marco Viniero. He is at the Center of Compulsive Behavior. He's a postdoctoral research fellow there at the National Institute of Drug Abuse. So welcome to the talk, but you didn't have to come very far, but that's wonderful. We're glad to have somebody from the NIH that competed well. He is interested in behavior and translational research with a focus on the social component of neuropsychiatric disorders. His paper is titled "Volitional Social Interaction Prevents Drug Addiction in Rat Models." And then last, but definitely not least, Dr. Robbie Weedo, who's a postdoctoral research fellow at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, fellow in sociology, Harvard Department of Sociology. He uses computational methods and traditional demographic methods. His work sits at the intersection of sociology, demography, and statistical genetics. He focuses especially on environmental and genetic etiologies of complex human and social behaviors like educational attainment, risk-taking behavior, smoking and drinking behaviors, and sexual orientation. His paper is entitled "Education, Smoking, and Cohort Change Forwarding a Multidimensional Theory of Environmental Moderation and Genetic Effects. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hargrove. And again, we'll go through each of the presentations, so be sure to write notes as you go. And come on up, Dr. Hargrove. This is you, right?
Thank you so much, Drs. Riley, Dr. Hunter, and members of the OBSSR. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm very grateful for this recognition, and I just hope that my work can continue to honor the legacy of Dr. Matilda White Riley. So the paper I'm going to be presenting today really looks at the extent to which racial and ethnic inequalities in BMI vary by gender and social class of origin, and assesses whether the intersections of race, ethnicity, gender, and early socioeconomic inequality result in persistent or widening gaps in BMI with age during the transition to early adulthood. So just a little bit of motivation for this project, right? So a host of prior work has documented the social distribution of BMI across different statuses. So we know that US-born Blacks, Hispanics, white women, and those of lower socioeconomic status have unhealthier BMIs than their white, male, and higher socioeconomic status counterparts. And so these findings are consistent with the fundamental causes of disease theory, which really argues that social factors embody access to important resources that can be used to avoid or allay health risks. And so socioeconomic position, racism, and sexism have been identified as key and significant fundamental causes of health as they shape access to critical determinants of health, including things like socioeconomic opportunities and resources, exposure to stressors, time and opportunity for health promoting activities, accelerated physiological aging, et cetera. And so while we know quite a lot about social inequalities and BMI, prior research has been limited in that it has generally focused on one dimension of inequality at a time. So looking at any kind of racial ethnic disparity while controlling for gender and or class. And so these types of approaches assume that social statuses operate independently of one another and have additive consequences, which is a bit of a tenuous assumption given that we go through life simultaneously holding a variety of statuses, right, and a variety of identities, and we don't experience them one at a time, and nor do others interpret them independently of one another. So it's very possible that the nature and the extent of racial and ethnic inequality might vary by gender and class. And so to assess this possibility, this paper incorporates a multiple hierarchy stratification perspective into the study of health disparities, which highlights the consequences of interacting systems of inequality. So this perspective generates several hypotheses regarding the nature of the relationship between social statuses and health. So one hypothesis is the multiple jeopardy hypothesis, which suggests that the poor health of multiply disadvantaged individuals is due to the sum of health hazards that are associated with each status. So really, low SES women of color, for example, are hypothesized to have the worst health, due to the sum of their disadvantages stemming from being a racial and ethnic minority, a woman, and of lower social class. Taking a more complex stance on social life, the intersectionality hypothesis posits that social inequalities are interdependent, right? And they often combine multiplicatively to mutually construct one another and create these unique contexts and social realities that are consequential for health and other life chances. So this perspective would indicate that those located at similar positions in the social hierarchy may actually have shared but not equivalent experiences that could differentially affect pathways to health. Also missing from the literature is attention given to how BMI inequalities may change with age. Right, so there's been a host of research that indicates age is a key dimension of inequality that is critically important for understanding social disparities in health, given that the nature of health risks and protective factors vary over time. But what we don't know is how risks and resources associated with unique positions in the social hierarchy, so at these intersections of race, gender, and SES, might change over time to shape BMI trajectories, particularly during the life stages of adolescence and early adulthood. And so there are two hypotheses that I test that really describe how the nature of BMI inequalities might change with age. The first being persistent inequality, which argues that health disadvantages or advantages hold over time, with age leaving the nature of health disparities unaltered. So this would predict there would be stable gaps in BMI with age. And the second hypothesis, cumulative inequality, suggests that health-relevant risks and resources accumulate over time. So those who experience advantages in early life continue to experience resources and fewer risk with age, and conversely, those who are initially disadvantaged in life accumulate more risks and fewer resources with age. So this would result in widening gaps. And so just taking all this together, again, this study addresses prior limitations of prior research by combining these multiple hierarchy stratification and life course perspectives to assess the extent to which racial ethnic inequalities in BMI vary by gender and social class of origin, and whether disparities remain stable or widen with age. So I used data from the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth, the 1997 cohort. The NLSY is a nationally representative ongoing panel study that collects information on employment, income, education, family, and of course, health. The baseline interview for the NLSY 97 was, as you guessed it, in 1997, and the study targeted individuals born between 1980 and 1984, when respondents were between the ages of 12 and 17. So respondents were interviewed annually since 1997. This paper stops at the 2011 wave, but the most recent wave available, I believe, is from 2015 to 2016, and retention rates averaged in the high 80s. So for this paper, the analytic sample is restricted to US-born non-Hispanic whites, non-Hispanic blacks, and Hispanics. BMI was collected at each wave using information on weight and height and following this equation. I think it's important to note that women who were pregnant at a particular wave were not included in the BMI measure for that wave. The predictors of interest are self-identified race, ethnicity, gender, and socioeconomic status of origin, being assessed by parental education and wealth. And then all of the models control for whether the respondent is missing on wealth. We know that's a finicky variable. Attrition across the waves, whether a respondent was ever incarcerated, whether they grew up in an urban environment, and whether they came from a two-parent household. Given the longitudinal nature of the data, multi-level models are used to estimate the joint consequences of race, ethnicity, gender, and SES of origin on the mean level of BMI between ages 13 and 31. And these models adjust for correlations and the non-independence of observations that would result from repeated measures of the same individuals across multiple waves. So really attacking that longitudinal data structure. And so for all models, a quadratic term was shown to have the best fit. So both a linear age and a quadratic age term are included in each model. And all the models are stratified by gender, and interactions between race, ethnicity, and SES of origin are estimated. For the second research question, I use growth curve models, which basically add interactions with the age slopes, just the linear age slopes in this case, to assess the extent to which any kind of disparity might change with age. And so growth curve models are able to estimate person-specific intercepts, so the initial value at age 13, as well as slopes or rates of change with age that describe intra-individual variation in the relationship between age and health. Okay, so finally the results. And so the first set of results looks at how the intersections of race, ethnicity, and gender are associated with average levels of BMI across ages 13 to 31. And so these are the average BMI levels for white men and white women, for black men and white women, both of which are higher, and for Hispanic men and Hispanic women, both, again, of which are higher. What's important to note here is that the racial ethnic disparity among women ranges from about 2 to 3 points on average, where among men it's usually less than or right around 1 point. So this indicates racial ethnic disparities are actually larger among women. And so I'm going to show you the results when we let the effect of race and gender vary across ages, right? Again, to see how these disparities might change with age. And so for all groups, this is what the trajectory would look like, in which BMI is increasing with age at a decelerating rate, which means that weight gain is steeper at earlier ages, and then levels off at later ages of young adulthood. So this is the trajectory for white men. For Black men, it's a little bit higher, and then for Hispanic men, it's even higher. And what's important to note here are these parallel lines between white and Black men, which indicates persistent or supports the persistent inequality hypothesis, right? There's an initial gap that remains stable through age. Whereas for Hispanic men, there's actually a widening gap with age between Hispanic and white men. For women, we get a similar story. So white women actually had the most advantaged trajectory, meaning being the lowest on the BMI scale. Black women have particularly high BMI trajectory, and Hispanic women are somewhere right in the middle. What's important here is that for both Black women and Hispanic women, they're gaining weight at a faster rate than their white counterparts. So again, this would suggest or support a cumulative inequality hypothesis. And also important to note is the gaps are much larger among women, right? Consistent with what we saw in the previous figure. Okay. So now we're looking at the joint consequences of race, ethnicity, and parental education on average levels of BMI among men. The results indicated that this interaction was only significant among men, so we won't look at what it would be for women. And so this is the expected relationship that we would hope for, right? So as you increase in education, your BMI goes down, right? Education is supposed to be a protective factor. But we see the exact opposite relationship for Black and Hispanic men, where there's actually an increase in BMI associated with increases in educational attainment, right? We see a similar story for the effects of race, ethnicity, and wealth among women, where we would expect BMI to go down at higher levels of wealth, but for Black women, it actually increases slightly, so that Black women from particularly wealthy backgrounds have the highest BMI level. And so again, we're going to look at these patterns by age, so we can see how disparities change with age. And so these are going to be the trajectories for men. I'm only going to show the trajectories for white and Hispanic men because the results indicated that parental wealth similarly affected the BMI trajectories for white and Black men. So the trajectories would be overlapping with white men anyway. So we see the trajectory for white men from very wealthy backgrounds, right? Again, the expected pattern where the trajectories are more, are unhealthier, right, as you go down the wealth scale. But for Hispanic men at high levels of wealth, they had the worst BMI trajectories, right? And there's less variation in the trajectories by wealth for Hispanic men. And all this culminates into a 12-point increase across the ages of 13 and 31 for wealthy Hispanic men, compared to only an 8-point increase for their white counterparts, compared, again, only to an 8-point increase among white men with low levels of wealth, and a 7-point increase among Hispanic men from less wealthy backgrounds. Right. And also important to note here is, again, a widening gap between Hispanic and white men who come from similarly wealthy backgrounds, again, due to the faster rate of weight gain among wealthy Hispanic men. And then this will be the last set of results that I show you. It's the same graph as before, but for women, right? So we're letting the effect of race and parental wealth vary across age. Here, the significant difference was between white and Black women. And the results also indicated that the intercepts and the age slopes didn't significantly differ by levels of parental wealth among white women. So that's why you only see, or will only see this one line for white women. And so again, similar story of that. There are these particularly high risks of Black women who come from wealthy backgrounds, right? They have very high levels of BMI by the time they get to their early 30s. In fact, the difference or the disparity in BMI between Black and white women from similar wealthy backgrounds grows from 3 points to 9 points by the end of young adult, or the beginning of young adulthood, I should say. So I just want to wrap up with some conclusions and contributions of the study. So this paper really extends prior work by investigating the extent to which social statuses intersect to shape trajectories of BMI across early life. And so the findings suggest that consequences of race ethnicity are gendered, with racial and ethnic inequalities generally being larger among women. The findings also indicate that socioeconomic status of origin do not confer the same benefits across racial ethnic groups, right? In fact, some of the largest disparities in BMI were at the highest levels of SES of origin. And so there's been prior work that has also found these diminishing returns to health of socioeconomic mobility among racial and ethnic minorities. But what is particularly novel about these findings is that SES of origin, right, was also shown to impact health in adulthood, right, indicating that the diminishing returns of socioeconomic status are experienced by individuals' social and family networks as well, right, so that children from households with higher levels of SES are similarly influenced by the context that has been established by their parents. And so we can talk in the Q&A a little bit about why that might be. Just quickly, a few limitations and avenues for future research, right? I only looked at Black, white, and Hispanic individuals, right? So I wasn't able to independently analyze Asians, Native Americans, and subgroups of the Latino population, right? So future research should try, to the extent that they can, to include other racial ethnic groups. BMI is based on a self-report measure, right, which might be subject to reporting bias. But if there were reporting bias, it likely were underestimates among women and those of lower socioeconomic status, and so the results would actually be conservative. And then I'll just leave you with this slide because I'm out of time about the take-home message of this paper, namely that health inequality across adolescence and early adulthood is dynamic. Right? Inequality is not experienced equally by all members of broadly defined social groups, and there's a need for multifaceted approaches to address health inequality. Thank you.
So thank you for coming. I'm Olivia Lee, and I am really, really excited to be here. And I want to say that this specific study is supported by NIDA, so I want to express a gratitude to NIDA, and also all the study participants who make this study is actually possible. So a little bit of background. So parental socioeconomic status, the relationship between parental socioeconomic status and adolescent substance use. And there's a study looking at the lower parental socioeconomic status is associated with increased substance use problem in youth. But at the same time, if you look at the existing study, there is no consensus. There is some discrepancy in the existing study, some saying that actually that is not true. What is happening is lower socioeconomic status is associated with a lower substance use problem in youth. So this discrepancy themselves is telling us we need more investigation in this topic area. And along with this general observation, we identified two specific gaps. The first one is a mechanism linking parental socioeconomic status and the youth substance use. And toward the end, we're thinking this notion of alternative and complementary reinforcement may help. What are those alternative and complementary reinforcement? I just want to refresh our mind about that one. So alternative reinforcement in essentially activities that compete with the substance use. They don't go together. Playing musical instrument, if you are intoxicated, it'll be really tricky to play violin or whatever, that kind of thing. So the competing one. The other one is complementary reinforcement. That one is substance use and activity goes well, really well. Like can increase the pleasure of the specific activity. So competing versus versus like adding more value. That's the idea. And these two notions might be helpful for us to understand the mechanism underlying socioeconomic status and the youth substance use. For alternative reinforcement, because limited resources and opportunities for low-income youth, potentially they have a limited alternative in reinforcement. And at the same time, because their resources and opportunities are limited, the activities, pleasurable activities that are available to them are low quality. So they're looking for something so that they can increase the pleasure or reinforcement value. And potentially for low-income youth, substances represent an easily accessible and affordable the way to increase their reinforcement value. So next one is developmental process. That's the next gap we are looking at. And toward that end, we're thinking we're going to apply the cascade model. I'm going to talk a little bit about that one. So the why developmental, the aspect we need, because as we know, substances inherently developmental. We have learned that one, and there's a developmental pattern and all of those, that's one. And the other one is this negative impact of earlier socioeconomic status potentially persisted or widened over time, as we heard from a previous the presentation. So we need to understand, we need to add one developmental perspective to this whole mechanism piece. So to that one, we're going to use developmental cascade model. Developmental cascade model, there are three key kind of components. The first one is a continuity. Continuity means stable. Like the individual functionings of individuals or the functionings of environment that will be stable over time. That is the notion of the continuity. Bidirectional is environment has an impact on individual, but at the same time, potentially youth have influence on environment as well. That is a bidirectional one. And the final one is amplification. That means whatever impact happening earlier one, that make it bigger over time and across domain. Those are the three ones. So with that one, based on our observation of empirical study and this notion, conceptual notion, we came up with two specific research hypotheses. The first one is this: diminished alternative reinforcement and elevated complementary reinforcement would serve as a mediating mechanism linking between the parental socioeconomic status, specifically parental education, and the youth substance use. And the second research question is we are hypothesizing that may happen in a cascading manner. And the cascading, we're going to look at continuity, specifically continuity and bidirectionality and amplification. The method, the study, the data from Happiness and Health Project, and this one's led by Dr. Leventhal, my colleague at the Preventive Medicine USC. And we have about 3,400 students and 10 schools in LA County. And we have a high retention rate and gender balance and the racially and ethnically diverse sample. The measures, parental education, the wave one. So parental education is wave one over here. And then the youth substance use, we conceptually operationalize in a way the polysubstance use, and we have all of those polysubstance use. And then alternative and complementary reinforcement, we use that one, use a modified version of the pleasant events schedule, and that's how we measure this alternative and complementary reinforcement. When I mentioned how we specifically operationalize this measure, there is 44 typically pleasant activity, like reading a book, going to a movie, playing with friends, and all of those. And we ask three things. The first one is a frequency of engagement, and the second one is a pleasure they experience, and the final one is whether or not that activities was engaged while using drug. And based on information, we got the reinforcement score. This is in line with a published work and a guideline how to get this reinforcement score. And if substance use was involved, that will be the complementary reinforcer. If substance use was not involved, that one is considered as the alternative reinforcer. And analysis is a negative binomial regression because, as we know, substance use are notoriously skewed, so we cannot use just a regular regression. It was negative binomial regression and path analysis, and we have a bunch of covariate and control variable. Everything was done in M+, and the missingness was handled with a FIML. And the other one is this data is clustered in school. So we use a complex analysis to handle that interdependence, not quite an independent like observation, students who are nested in a school. I just want to show you, this is my analysis model, and from now on, I'm going to specifically highlighting which specific angle is relevant to which specific research question, the research hypothesis. First, the research hypothesis, this one is just a refresher. We are looking at the role of complementary and alternative reinforcement underlying the link between the education and the youth substance use. So it looks like this. I did not plug the number because sometimes the numbers are too much on the screen, but I'm going to walk through what is happening. The first one is all the path was happening in an expected direction. So meaning is if I have a lower the education, that decrease alternative reinforcer. That, as again, reminder, alternative reinforcer means stuff that are compete with the substance use. So that decrease. And the complementary reinforcer increase. That means if I have a lower parental education, that increase the complementary reinforcer. So all the paths, the happening in an expected direction. And because this is a mediating hypothesis, a critical thing is what happened to this, the direct impact. When I add all the paths, what happened is it disappeared. It is not statistically significant anymore. So what they want telling us is that the alternative and complementary reinforcer definitely look like function as a mechanism underlying the link between the parental education and the youth substance use. So the second one, again, just as a reminder where I'm going, the second one, now I'm looking at the cascade model, and specifically those are three. The first one I'm going to look at is a continuity. Continuity one, this path is speaking to that one. Continuity means stable in each domain. So earlier alternative reinforcer is a predictive of a later alternative reinforcer. Substance use earlier one is a predictive of later, and this is stable, yes, is happening. So my hypothesis about continuity is supported. The second one is bidirectional influences. So the environment has influences on the youth, but at the same time, potentially youth may have influences on the environment as well. The first one is alternative reinforcer has definitely influence on children, on youth substance use. So you have a lot of alternative reinforcer that will decrease your substance use at the next wave. And if you have a lot of complementary reinforcer, then that will increase your substance use, the youth substance use later on. So that is happening, that direction from environment to individual, that's there. Next one is from the youth to the reinforcer, and that's happening as well. If youth use substances, that decrease the alternative reinforcer at the later wave, and the youth substance use increase the complementary reinforcer later wave. So bidirectional hypothesis is supported. The final one is amplification over time, and this amplification over time looks like this. So when we just look at the number, we thought, okay, so looks like really big. This one is the magnitude-wise. This one is smaller than this one, and looks like the amplified over time. But when we did a statistical test, they were not. So when we did a statistical fix and to see whether or not that that like worsened the model fit and all those tests, when we did that one, statistically, they're the same, even if they look like different. So the amplification hypothesis over time is not supported. So the conclusion, the first one is alternative reinforcer and the complementary reinforcer serves as a mechanism linking parental socioeconomic status and the substance use. And the direct effect, it disappeared. Direct effect from parental education to the children's substance use behavior that disappeared when we have all the reinforcer as a mediator. And a cascading process, I had a three specific, we were looking for three specific one, continuity, bidirectionality, and amplification. Continuity, yes, there is a continuity. Bidirectionally, yes, there is a bidirectionality. Amplification, at least in our data, no. It doesn't seem to be that happening. So prevention implication at a community level, increasing access to affordable, high-quality activities for youth who live in a low-income family and low-income neighborhood will be really helpful. And the other one is we really want to think about the potentially we may need a community-based prevention efforts to reduce adolescents' access to substances, especially the youth who are from the low-income family and the low-income neighborhood. At an individual level, psychological intervention program that cultivate awareness of cost and the benefits and reinforcement and evaluate and thinking about that one, potentially that might be helpful so the youth can understand what are the costs. If I get involved in the substances, what are the costs and what are the benefits and all of those. That's it.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm very excited to be here and extremely honored to receive this award today. Today, I'm going to be talking about our recent paper, Volitional Social Interaction Prevents Drug Addiction in Rat Models, and also I will just show you some follow-up on this line of research. But before I start, I would like to thank my mentors for my Center on Compulsive Behavior Fellowship, Yavin Shaham, Marisela Morales, and Jeff Schombon from NIDA in Baltimore, and also Robert Messing from UT Austin. A special thanks goes to Daniele Caprioli. Now he's assistant professor in Rome. We started together the choice between drug versus food in our lab. Special thanks also to Michelle Zhang, my first post-bac student. Now she started medical school, and my new post-bac student, Trinity Russell. Also, I would like to thank all these people and so many others, because science is not just about a single person, but it's just about a community that works for a common goal to achieve the same result. Okay, so in our lab, we are interested to study the high relapse rates during abstinence. As we can see from these two graphs, the proportion of abstinence decrease over time, independently of the drug class that we are considering. And unfortunately, in the last 40 years, the situation hasn't changed that much. So how do we model relapse at the preclinical level? Well, we implant a catheter in the jugular vein of our rats, and then we train them for self-administration. So the animal has to press this lever, and we receive an infusion of drug, and at the same time, we receive a different compound of cues. It can be tone or light, for example. And then at different abstinence phase, we test the animal in what we call relapse test. The test is in extinction condition, meaning that we present the liver, the cue associated with the drug self-administration, but the drug is no longer available, meaning that what we measure is the rat seeking the drug during the test. Using this model, we have hundreds of papers showing that different molecules, different brain regions, different pathways are critical for relapse. But unfortunately, those results fail to translate to humans. So what are the limitations of our preclinical animal models? This is a classical, a typical drug self-administration session. And here we can see that the animal presses the lever to receive an infusion of drug through this spring. And the animal will do this, the animal will love to do that, but we can see here that there is a single animal with one single option. And actually, if we do not prevent or reduce drug taking, the animal will take drug until with the risk of dying because they get sick and they can die of overdose. But this is not what is happening in the real world. For humans, drugs are competing with different alternatives. Can be social alternative, can be money, etc. So since I joined Yavin's lab, the main question for us was how can we introduce alternative non-drug rewards in our animal model? Well, as often happens in neuroscience, the answer is always present in the literature. If you go back in time, you will find the answer that you're looking for. Indeed, in 1940, Sprague very elegantly showed that chimpanzees will prefer palatable food, in this case a piece of banana, rather than an injection of morphine. And since the 70s, different labs have been using choice procedure to study alternative non-drug rewards competing with the drug. And then recently, Serge Ahmed from Bordeaux convinced the entire community that if we provide a mutually exclusive choice between sweet solution and drug, the majority of rats will prefer sweet solution over drug. This is pretty much what we wanted to do with Daniela at the beginning. We wanted to implement this choice in our lab. This is how the choice works. So here, this side is associated with drug self-administration, and this side is associated with food self-administration. Immediately, you can see the difference between this video and the video that I showed you before. Now that the animal has an alternative, is not taking anymore the drug on the other side of the chamber. And we use this model to achieve voluntary abstinence and study incubation of drug craving. Incubation refers to this intensification of drug seeking over time. Here we can see in the x-axis the withdrawal day when the animal were tested, and in the y-axis the number of lever presses. And you can see that the animal will increase the number of lever presses, meaning that the animal is seeking more and more the drug over time. This is translationally relevant because now we know that incubation is a phenomenon also true for humans. For example, here just two examples for methamphetamine abusers and for cocaine use. But there is a huge limitation with the classical incubation model. The limitation is due to this forced abstinence, because forced abstinence away from the drug environment does not occur often in humans. Because we know that abstinence is often self-imposed despite drug availability due to the pending loss of alternative non-drug rewards. So we are trying to create this emerging literature, trying to model the voluntary aspect of abstinence in humans. And this is extremely important because contingency management, which is one of the most successful treatments for humans, works exactly in the same way. Abstinence is rewarded with alternative non-drug rewards, for example, vouchers or money. It's important to say that when contingency discontinues, humans tend to relapse. This is pretty much what we were able to show in our model. We also extend our finding to female rats and heroin. We found this critical role of a subpopulation of activated neuron in the dorsomedial striatum, and also we identified this projection from the anterior insular cortex to the central amygdala critical for relapse after voluntary abstinence. Although we spend, there are 4 years of my life in one slide, it's kind of sad. We spend a lot of time working on these projects. We were feeling that there was still a translational missing in this model because the food was not the perfect match with the human situation. So because we know that the alternative that can compete with drugs for human is social by nature. You risk to lose your family, your partner, your kids. Obviously, I'm not saying that social is the only way to create a better animal model of drug addiction, because the reason for limited translation success of studies using addiction models are complex and multifactorial. Obviously, we have done a lot in the last 30, 40 years in the addiction field. We moved from passive drug exposure to drug self-administration. As I said, we introduced a choice model in the addiction field. But also there is, in the other provocative side, other scientists are arguing that we will never get a very good translational model, in this case for the unique ability of humans to communicate through languages. And I actually agree with them because let's be honest, we will never be able to get full homology between our model and the human situation. But what I'm trying to say here, that probably we can reduce the gap that is still existing between the rat model and the human situation by providing indeed social reward as alternative to drug use. And this is pretty much what Marcus Heilig suggested in this opinion piece. It's time to connect, bringing the social context into the addiction neuroscience. This is critical because a really good treatment for addiction doesn't have just to stop or reduce drug use, but it has to promote a reallocation of behavior towards no drug activity. I'm not inventing anything here because we know that this is something that we can do. For example, a social support can be used for prevention. We have the Iceland experience. In Iceland, the community is providing sport classes or gym membership for free. And they show that indeed adolescents stay away from drug because of these alternatives that are free for them. And social support can be used also as a treatment. Ken Silverman at Johns Hopkins is showing that if we provide a therapeutic workplace, we increase the opportunity to keep people abstinent. Obviously, these are very nuanced and rich experiences that we cannot model in animals, but we can model some part of this social interaction. Once again, in 1963, Mason and colleagues showed that chimpanzees will prefer to interact with an experimenter just being pet from the experimenter rather than get food. And this is, once again, translational critical because this is exactly how the community reinforcing approach works. So it's the community, you can communicate, you can have social support and stay away from drug. This is what we wanted to do in our recent paper, but the main limitation was exactly here, was a methodological limitation because we did not have an apparatus to make this choice possible. Luckily, my dad is a blacksmith, so I grew up with the idea of building everything starting from a piece of iron. So I went downstairs, I started to cut plastic and metal, and I came out with this design. This is, I built this from scratch, so I combined the classical self-administration chamber with a smaller chamber in the other side, and in between I put this sliding door. And this is how the choice works now. The choice is pretty much identical to the one that I showed you before, but the difference is this time this wall is associated with social self-administration. You can see as soon as the liver are out, the animal will press because he knows that there is his bud in the other side waiting for him because they like to play and interact. Obviously, if this is what we see from our side, this is what a rat sees from her side. This is Michelle, my previous post-bac student, trying to remove all the partners once the animal were making the choice. And as you can see, it was very intense. It was not easy. Her face says much more than what I can tell. I think that this was the sad moment when Michelle decided to go to medical school. She was like, I'm sorry, I'm out of PhD, I'm not going to do this. But this story aside, let's move to some data. So we wanted to select a subpopulation of addicted rats, or rats that compulsively seek the drug. So we trained them for methamphetamine for 50 days. This is a very kind of difficult experiment because keep the catheter pattern for 50 days is very challenging. And then we test them for different measures because we wanted to see if they were really compulsively seeking the drug. So we wanted to see if they were willing to press when the drug was not available, if they were motivated to seek the drug when the ratio of responding was increased more and more, or if they were willing to press despite negative consequences. When we put all these information together, we obtained that 19% of them obtained a high addiction score. So at this point, actually, we were betting in the lab because we said, okay, if this rat is willing to press 1,000 times to get a single reward of methamphetamine, obviously, when we provide the choice, it will prefer drug over social interaction. Well, we all failed because independently of the addiction score, social interaction was so strong, was so high as a reward that even the high addicted rats prefer social over methamphetamine. We also wanted to test if this procedure will prevent or not incubation of drug craving. So we train animal for, social interaction. In this case, we did male and female with male and female with female during the choice. And then methamphetamine. And then you can see here that all the animals prefer social over drugs starting from day one. And this is the very interesting part because we observe a completely blockade of incubation of drug craving after this period of social interaction compared to the classical forced substance where we keep the animal back to the facility. So we started to investigate the mechanism underlying this lack of incubation, and we identified this microcircuit within the central amygdala, showing that after a period of forced substance, there is an activation of the medial part of the central amygdala because of this selective recruitment of a subpopulation of neurons in the lateral part of the central amygdala. Conversely, this period of social interaction prevents the activity of the output neuron in the central amygdala. For this reason, we don't see incubation. As I said, I would like to show you just briefly the follow-up on the paper. As I said, it was getting hard to have some postback working for me because everybody was like, I don't want to do all this work. So I had to do something. I had to make an automatic version. And this is how the automatic version looks like. Pretty much I create this mesh between the two sides of the chamber. So now the rat can press this lever, and they can interact through the hole. And you can see that they can still touch each other, but I don't have to stay in the basement and remove them, so I can go upstairs and write grants. We want everybody to use our model. As I said, in our philosophy, science is for everybody. We don't own anything, so we want to disseminate the model. So I create this IKEA-like instruction. It's pretty easy to follow. It's like I do not provide the screw and the screwdriver, but I provide the instructions. But now MedAssociate is making these box commercially available, and these are the customers that are already willing to buy the box to start the model because we think this can be a translational upgrade from what we had so far. So in conclusion, I really hope that I convince you that addiction is not just a neurobiological disease characterized by compulsive drug use despite negative consequences, but it also, and not mutually exclusive, a neuropsychosocial puzzle. So when we think about addiction, we don't need to think just about a brain region. We need to think more broadly about other aspects of the addiction. And this is the cover that I made when the paper was accepted. I was happier for the cover than for the paper. But pretty much here I wanted to show that there is a lighter path than the drug addiction path, and probably in the path there is a friend that is willing to help us, waiting for us to get out of the addiction cycle. Thank you.
Great, so I'm very honored to be here. Thank you everyone for being here to listen to the presentation. I'm already worried about time a little bit, so I'm gonna speed a bit and skip some slides in the introduction so we can sort of get to the meat of the paper. But I wanted to give you a brief introduction to this new exciting interdisciplinary branch of research called social science genetics. So what is social science genetics? Whether we're giving it the title sociogenomics, social science genetics, or genodemography, we can think of it essentially as a type of biodemography. It's the incorporation of genetic data into sociology, demography, the social sciences, or health behavioral research, especially as it's applied to those behaviors specifically, sociological outcomes, behavioral outcomes. We think there are a lot of interesting potential payoffs for doing this in the social sciences, including what we'll highlight here, understanding how the environment might interact with biology through the framework of a gene-environment interaction. I also just wanted to note, though, that this work is sometimes highly controversial. So I urge that when engaging in this type of research, we really emphasize that there are many challenges to the appropriate use, interpretation, and communication of these sometimes controversial outcomes when it comes to genetics. I'll skip this, but I will talk briefly about why we're so interested in doing this sort of work now as opposed to in the past or in the future. The first reason is that there's been rapid advances in measuring genetic data. So we're doing this at far greater scale and with rapidly falling costs. So you can see back in 2001, sequencing a single genome cost about $1 million a pop. Now in 2019, we're under $1,000 for sequencing a single genome. We're also beginning as social scientists to incorporate genetic data into social science data sets. So data sets like the Health and Retirement Study, the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent to Adult Health. And we've also seen in the last few years dramatic advances in identifying genetic variants not associated just with medical or psychiatric outcomes, but sort of associated with these behavioral outcomes as well. So what is a GWAS? A GWAS is sort of an a-theoretical approach that really is the methodological workhorse of gene discovery over the last few years. So in statistical genetics and sociogenomics, this is how we find variants associated with outcomes of interest. It allows us to sort of discover at the base level of variation in the human genome, and this base level is called the single nucleotide polymorphism, or the SNP. It's important to remember in GWAS that the effects of SNPs across the human genome are very, very small, and they're additive in nature. And this means to be statistically well-powered to discover these small effects, we need enormous sample sizes. So what's a single nucleotide polymorphism? Again, this is the base unit of variation that we're looking at in the human genome when we're performing a GWAS. If you remember back from high school biology, this is a DNA sequence variation that occurs when a single nucleotide, here an A, T, C, or G, in the genome is altered. And there are millions of SNPs in the human genome. We're going to try to measure as many of them as possible when we're doing a genome-wide association study. In the very basic regression framework, this actually looks really, really simple, even though it's computationally intensive. So on the left-hand side of our equation, we have our outcome of interest. We're regressing that on our genotypes, XIJ, the genotype of individual I for SNP-J, and our beta coefficients here then are our genetic effects, the effects of those variation sites in the genome. This is what a Manhattan plot looks like. These are what sort of the results of a GWAS sort of look like when they come out to you. So all of the places in the genome that we're measuring there are on the x-axis across the 22 chromosomes in the human genome, and sort of the tallest peaks there represent the SNPs that have reached genome-wide significance. Because we're testing multiple hypotheses at once, the p-value in a GWAS instead of 0.05 is 5 times 10 to the negative 8. Okay, so like I said, there are lots of inherited disorders. The interesting thing about social science genetics is that we've been moving from GWAS on medical and psychiatric outcomes into this territory of sociological or social science outcomes. So back in 2013, the first big GWAS on a behavioral outcome was published in Science on educational attainment, or years of completed education. And you can see, as those projects have sort of gone through time since 2013, the number of genome-wide significant loci, as well as the sample size of the discovery sample, has been increasing. So I was very lucky last year to be highly involved in this project, where we assembled 1.1 million individuals' genomes and performed a GWAS on educational attainment. We found 1,271 approximately independent locations in the genome that were highly associated with years of completed education. We also can do some of this work for health behaviors as well. So it's not just social science outcomes, but last year I was also highly involved in a project published in Nature Genetics where we assembled 1.2 million individuals' genomes, and we found locations in the genomes that were highly associated with smoking and drinking behaviors, like age of smoking initiation, cigarette smoke per day, if someone ever quit smoking, drinks or alcoholic beverages consumed per week, and this very large sample for whether a person was actually ever a regular smoker or not. Okay, so all of that to say that in this paper, the one that I won the award for, instead of being interested in sort of the aggregate SNP effects across these very large samples of millions of people, we wanted to ask a more nuanced sociological question. Do these sort of SNP effects, these genetic effects, instead differ somehow by environmental context? So here we're using the framework of a gene by environment and interaction. So many social scientists are interested in gene by environment interactions, or what we call the environmental moderation of genetic effects. But to date, much of this work has been done in looking at single traits, one trait at a time. So is there a gene by environment interaction for educational attainment? When we say the environment here, of course, this is a really messy measure of the environment. We always need better measures of the social environment in the social sciences. But what we're thinking about here really is, do SNP effects, the effects of these locations in the genome, might they differ by country, by gradients of socioeconomic status, perhaps by neighborhood, or here in this paper, might they differ by birth cohort? So what we're going to be doing is extending from the single trait case to the multidimensional case, positing that genetic correlations, a parameter that I'll explain on the next slide, might also differ across environments. We're going to call this, instead of a gene by environment interaction, a genetic correlation by environment interaction. And here we'll be loosely operationalizing the social environment by looking at the birth cohort, extending the theory, the sociological theory on cohorts to the realm of the genetic correlation. What is a genetic correlation? It's really just a fancy genetic version of a regular correlation coefficient. So a genetic correlation between a given phenotype or outcome, let's say educational attainment, A, and phenotype or outcome B, let's say smoking here, measures the extent to which the SNPs, the places in the genome, that affect phenotype A also tend to simultaneously affect phenotype B. Genetic correlation is sometimes colloquially referred to as genetic overlap, and it's important to remember that it can apply to two different phenotypes, smoking and educational attainment, or it can also apply to two different groups for the same phenotype. So we might be interested in looking inside of smoking, what is the genetic correlation between men and women. So we're going to posit here that the genetic correlation itself could differ across environments. There's a couple of necessary criteria to fulfill in order to begin looking at what an RG by E might look like. First, both phenotypes must be influenced to some degree by genes, and we measure that with heritability. It's important to note that almost all human behavioral outcomes are in fact heritable. And also, we have to have genetic effects on one or both phenotypes differing across environments, which means there has to be some base level of G by E for individual traits before we carry it forward into the genetic correlation by environment framework. So we began to think which phenotypes might have undergone RG by E, which environmental features might we want to be studying here. And we landed on education and smoking. Why did we do that? Because we know that the environment in which decisions about education and tobacco use are made has changed very dramatically since the 1900s, especially in the US, but also in other countries as well. So we have increased economic and social returns to education and diminished economic security among poorly educated workers, as well as heightened public awareness of the negative effects of smoking on health, most notably the 1964 Surgeon General's report in the US. Here are some nice graphs that demonstrate those demographic trends, both in education on the left and in smoking behavior on the right. At the same time, we've seen sort of this tied socio-demographic gradient in smoking that's sort of become well known in the literature. So this statistic from NHIS shows us that in 2015, 24% of high school dropouts reported ever regular smoking at some point versus only 6%. And even though we know this trend is persistent in the literature, it's sort of shocking to see the differences in the population parameters here. We also know that both conditions for RG by E are met with smoking and education, as I discussed them earlier. So both education and smoking are known to be moderately heritable outcomes. And there are also some good papers that show evidence of strong birth cohort differences in genetic effects on both education and smoking. So we thought these would be good candidates for testing this hypothesis. So the question is, has the genetic correlation between years of schooling and smoking changed across birth cohorts? In the first analysis, we used two separate and relatively small US-based data sets to test the hypothesis. One data set represents early birth cohorts, the other one later birth cohorts. You might be asking, why did we use these small cohorts? The answer to that is because there wasn't, and there still isn't, a large US genotype data set spanning a wide range of birth cohorts. Luckily for us, at the time that we were doing this analysis, a sort of really interesting data set based in the UK became available. It's called the UK Biobank, and we use this to replicate these results in a far more convincing and well-powered way. So in the first analysis, we're using data from the Health and Retirement Study and also the AdHealth study. As is traditional in these analyses, we'll limit our samples to unrelated individuals of European ancestry. There are some descriptives for HRS and AdHealth. And so what we do, sort of the method here, though computationally intensive again, is pretty simple. We run a genome-wide association study of both educational attainment and ever having regular smoked in each of our data sets. And then within both data sets, we use this methodological software and tool called linkage disequilibrium score regression to calculate that genetic correlation between education and smoking in both the HRS and in AdHealth. So here are what the results from that first analysis look like. You can see that as we move from HRS to AdHealth, the point estimate and the genetic correlation has changed. So we go from negative 0.35 to negative 0.729. The magnitude of the genetic correlation, in fact, has increased across the two data sets. But as you'll notice, because we have very small samples here, the confidence intervals are very wide, and so the point estimates are indistinguishable from one another. Luckily, we had the UK Biobank available to sort of dig further and replicate our results. So the UK Biobank is this sort of really amazing data set based in the US, I think a framework for what genetic and phenotypic data sets might want to look like someday in the US. It's a single data set that contains well phenotype data and genotype data on 500,000 individuals. So that's a huge data set. What we did here is we divided our full sample into 5 birth cohort groups of roughly equal sizes, and we estimated our genetic correlations between educational attainment and smoking in each of those 5 equally powered bins. So here's what this result looks like. So you can see that the sort of gradient in the genetic correlation continues. The estimated genetic correlation between educational attainment and having ever regularly smoked grows in magnitude across the 5 birth cohorts. And here, even though we can't distinguish all of the estimates from each other, we were actually able to distinguish the first genetic correlation estimate from the last one here in a statistically significant fashion. So we were actually quite excited to see this replicate in a much more well-powered fashion here. Okay, so broad conclusions before I move into a little bit of discussion. First, from this paper, it looks like the genetic correlation between years of schooling and having ever regularly smoked appears to have grown across birth cohorts. We therefore posit that environmental conditions in this case, but perhaps more generally, could in fact have the power to change the relationships between complex social outcomes at the genetic level as driven by social factors. This is relevant for cohort theory because it posits that perhaps downstream effects of DNA on wide-ranging outcomes may be bundled uniquely across birth cohorts due to differences in the social environments in which cohorts progress through the life course. A little bit of discussion. Why does this matter? I think it matters in a few important ways. So first, the RG by E perspective highlights the need to situate genetic effects and shared genetic effects within a particular environmental context. But there's, one particular application where I think this is going to be particularly salient in the coming years, and this is in considering polygenic scores. So polygenic scores are these wonderful tools that come to us from statistical genetics that allow us to take the effects of a GWAS and essentially calculate a single variable predictor, genetic predictor, for the outcome of interest. And it summarizes the extent to which a person that possesses or a person might possess SNPs associated with that outcome. You might, for instance, take the GWAS of educational attainment and then create a polygenic score for AdHealth that allows you to predict completed education or other related outcomes in the AdHealth data set. However, we know from one of my wonderful colleagues at the Broad Institute that there's some concern about whether these genetic predictors created in European samples are actually portable across diverse ancestral groups. In a similar way, from the results of this paper, I think it's important to wonder whether the polygenic scores developed in these large GWAS discovery samples are actually portable across not just ancestries, but different environmental or demographic characteristics. There's already some preliminary evidence that this actually might not be the case and that this problem might be persistent when we're considering base characteristics like sex or age. And this is sort of the final slide that summarizes sort of my research agenda in this area, and I think the important messages. I think it's clear that without a deeper understanding and appreciation for the role of the environmental and demographic context, whether that's socioeconomic status, gender, childhood environment, it will likely be impossible to make the results of the genetics for behavioral and health outcomes maximally useful or even accurate for everyone. And of course, we're interested in the health of everyone. And finally, I think this really necessitates the importance of truly interdisciplinary expertise, training, and collaboration between the behavioral and social sciences and statistical genetics. Thanks so much to all the funders who funded the work, and that's it for me.
Thank you for wonderful presentations. I'd invite the 4 speakers to come up to the panel here, and we'll start the Q&A process. As folks are asking questions, if you'd be sure to come up to a microphone and say who you are and where you're from just before you ask the question to give the speakers a little bit of context. And so I see as they're getting seated that you have a question. You want to come up to the table and ask the question here with the microphone?
Okay, hi. Congratulations to all of you. Astonishing work, and there's a lot to think about. Ms. Lee, my name is Dr. Mindy Reiser. I'm a social scientist. I'm vice president of an NGO that works on peace building and conflict resolution, so this down the road is rather relevant in terms of people's life chances and behaviors. In terms of what you looked at lower socioeconomic level, but different communities may have individuals who do not have high levels of education or income, but there's a rich cultural life. There's a rich sense of community. Religion plays a major role. I wonder how you look at that. Again, if you're Vietnamese or Mexican or Cambodian, your mosque, your church, your extended family may matter. How does that factor into what you've been studying?
Hello. Oh. So thank you for the question. So that is a really excellent question. So the model that I set up is essentially risk process, like a cascading risk process. But the factors that you talk about is that it can be actually kind of counter against that one. It can generate a resilience process. So potentially the whole risk cascade process, that itself, that might be different depending on cultural capital that the community has or the religiosity, all those, the kind of promoting and protective factors can disrupt the cascading process. At the moment in the given study, we didn't have not look at that one, and the H&H, happiness and health study, we have not measured those aspects, but we're talking about it, and especially we have racially and ethnically diverse the students we have, and they live in LA. LA is like anywhere, but LA is a very kind of culturally rich place, and they live in there, so we want to take a look at it. It's like a future work, but conceptually I can see that one that will generate a resilience process against that cascading risk process.
Well, while folks are thinking about questions they want to ask, I'll ask some because I think it's interesting that 3 of the 4 studies that were presented thought about parental education or educational attainment, and 2 were looking at alternative reinforcers. I want to focus on the alternative reinforcers question and ask Taylor, you in your paper talk about sort of the next questions that are needed to understand these mechanisms that sort of explain these differential effects. I thought it was interesting that parental education wasn't as protective for some of these groups, and how you were thinking about as Marco and Olivia were talking about alternative reinforcers, because you could hypothesize that by having more education, more income, you actually have an environment with a lot of additional alternative reinforcers to compete with food as a reinforcer. Any thoughts about kind of next steps or some mechanisms and how that ties into the alternative reinforcement?
You hear me? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that question. So I really think we have to think broader about the social environment in which people are situated, in which they're navigating. Just because you might have or grow up with a parent who has a particular level of educational attainment doesn't necessarily mean you live in an environment that allows you to have healthy choices, and you could still live in an environment which constrains the amount of health promoting activities that are available. So I think it's going to be important for future research to consider the context in which people are living, especially because we know that particularly among African Americans, middle class African Americans, still live in neighborhoods and environments that don't always measure up to their either income levels or educational levels. And so I think, one, there is something to be said for unique protective factors that might exist in someone's neighborhood or surrounding environment. I'm actually doing some current work looking at how the surrounding racial composition of one's neighborhood is at times protective of the physical and mental health of African Americans, depending on their skin tone, and how predominantly white areas or neighborhoods sometimes put African Americans at increased risk of physical and emotional health. So I think overall, it's important to think about what the surrounding environment, what the surrounding context looks like, and how these individual resources are operating within those contexts.
Excellent, thank you. Susan?
Hi, I want to extend my congratulations as well. They were all fascinating, really informative, and well-done studies, bodies of work. I wanted to ask Dr. Venero, I was interested in your early studies looking at sugar. It looked like sugar-sweetened foods versus drugs, and the rats preferring the sugar-sweetened foods. And I know food addiction is a controversial topic, but has your lab looked at some of the social reinforcers as alternatives to the food? And what have you found in that case?
Yeah, absolutely. Food addiction is kind of a tricky word, I will say, but is a real thing. I mean, people are showing very convincingly that the circuit that underline addiction somehow are more or less the same, the one for food addiction. But aside, I have done some social versus food, and I will tell you that social is stronger than food. Rats prefer social interaction over food, even when I food deprive them. Usually, in whatever I show, the animal are not food deprived. But even when I food deprive, the animal are still going for the social interaction. Social interaction is like the strongest reward I ever seen for rats, at least for rats.
I think Lene and then Augie.
Yes, and I'll add my congratulations as well. Really great talks. My question is also for Dr. Venero, and I thought you did an excellent job kind of creating this new translational model with the social interaction. And my question is, how would you, or have you thought about including mental health into that model? So, for example, if you have a depressed and addicted rat, will they still press the lever for social interaction, or would that no longer be a reward?
That's a great point, and we are starting to do that. We are starting with some PTSD model, so we are trying to stress either the animal that has to press for the social partner, or we are starting to stress the social partner to see if there is some sort of social transmission. But we haven't done that yet because, as I said, the model is kind of new. So now is time to open to all these questions because I think that the model can go even broadly from the drug addiction. We can use this model to study autism spectrum disorder, for example, because now we have finally an objective measure the animal has to press to interact with the other rat. So I think we can do that.
I know you just, Lena, we're recording this so that people can hear the questions. That'd be great. It's the button that has like a little, looks like lines in front of the face.
So I apologize. This is also from Marco, but I did also have a question for Olivia. I don't know if you said which substance was the focus of your study.
We did both methamphetamine and heroin. Now we are doing remifentanil, and we have some data also with alcohol. And pretty much the situation is identical across drugs.
Okay, and a follow-up, not a follow-up, a different question. It seemed like the early parts of the work you were describing where you found the alternative reinforcers wouldn't have naturally led you to then looking at social support and social interaction. I'm curious to know, there's a couple of sociologists on the panel. I know why they would do that, but it wasn't clear to me what drove you to that place.
That's a great point. Because I am interested in the translational relevance of our models. So, studying the human literature, I was considering that our food choice was not exactly the way to go. So I wanted to implement something that because addiction is a social problem overall, because in the last 30 years, especially in the relapse field, we have been focused only on one part of the model. So I wanted to kind of open the field in this social world by bringing social as an alternative. So I thought that my experience with the choice drug versus food was a great base to start the choice with using social as an alternative, because we have data on the community reinforcing, we have the therapeutic workplace. So I thought it was time to create something that was closer to the human situation, because we have done a lot. We have so much technology that now we can use in our model, but still there is a huge gap between preclinical and clinical. So I thought that the way to go was to try to close the gap between me and them. That was overall the process.
Erica?
Operate this thing. So Erica Spots from OBSSR. So great talks, everybody. This is really energizing and exciting. I have kind of a question for Robbie. I love how you integrate both the genetics and the sociology, social environment, everything, and I agree with you. I think we need more of that, and more people who are well-trained and well-educated in a broad spectrum of things. I guess I'd like your opinion as a young investigator, whatever we're calling you, earlier on and than some of us. How do we do that? Oh, you don't have that.
Okay, so the first step is to establish programs that are directed at doing this in both ways. So my advisor at Colorado, Jason Boardman, was awarded a T32 to sort of start to formalize the type of training that I did. My training was highly cobbled together, and it was a lot of me sort of figuring out what pieces I would need. Learning sort of intense programming and computational analysis is not an easy thing to do for a social scientist right off the bat, and so I had to identify the places where I could get this training and sort of seek it out. What you need is PIs, and there are a few of us, but you need PIs who are highly invested and know what it takes to put together this type of training, and you need them to help build programs between institutions. So I'm sort of already thinking at the Broad Institute of how I can sort of have a position where I'm able to bring computer scientists, biologists, sociologists together under one sort of umbrella. But you sort of need the infrastructure of a formalized program. I really believe in that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. I'm Erin Ellis. I'm from the Office of Disease Prevention here at NIH, and my question is for Taylor, informed by Robbie's work. So I'm wondering if you've considered the extent to which some of the age effects you see aren't necessarily age per se, but changes in social conditions for different race ethnicities over time, and if you've explored that at all.
Yeah, so whether the changing context might be playing a role. That's certainly something to look at. I think given the way that society has been arranged in terms of residential locations, right, that changes very little, particularly in the early parts of our life. So across these ages of 13 to 31, our environments, at least where we're living, don't necessarily change drastically. That being said, I do think that the surrounding context plays a very vital role in some of the findings that we're seeing. Again, some of the things that I'm working on now and hope to continue to pursue in the future really do exactly that, explicitly take into account the context in which individuals are growing up and the context in which they're moving into as young and middle-aged adults. And so with the new data that some colleagues and I are collecting and merging on to the AdHealth study that Robbie mentioned, we can take a more explicit and deeper look at that. Absolutely.
Thank you. And I think you had a question? So for everybody that's sitting at the table, it's the middle button with a face. You push until you get a red light. There you go.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sudha Shivaram. I'm from the NCI, and I had a question for both Taylor and Robbie. So first, Taylor, I just loved reading your paper. I mean, the analysis is really interesting, but I could not help also think about the next step, right? Like in terms of interventions. I mean, you do read in the literature, for example, the wide literature in the built environment that's coming up. So what are your thoughts, or are you going towards the next step of kind of what do we do at the community level in order to at least begin, the first steps of addressing these disparities? That was for you. And for Robbie, I just wanted you to talk a little bit about the UK Biobank. What kind of resources and how long has it been going on? And do you see what can we do to replicate that type of resource here to do these type of studies?
Thank you so much for that question. Right, so the purpose of this work is to really think about effective policy interventions that'll work for a broader community. And I think based on some of the findings I presented here, some of the findings that are coming out, what's really important, again, is to identify these unique protective factors that might exist in people's environments. And so the paper that I referenced earlier is really looking at how African Americans of different skin tones, how their health varies compared to their white counterparts. And so in this particular project, finding that for medium-skinned African Americans or African Americans perceived as having medium brown skin, they're actually getting this protective factor when growing up in predominantly black neighborhoods. And part of that is due to feelings of being more socially accepted, more integrated, being seen as more attractive, right, having more of those community kinds of networks and cohesion. And then on the flip side, African Americans of darker brown skin actually experience this increased risk of poor health when growing up in predominantly white neighborhoods. And so really thinking about the types of stressors that are unique to those types of environments. And so in terms of community interventions, I think there's going to be more work needed to identify the protective factors, the unique protective factors that can be cultivated at the moment. And I think a lot of that has to do with just feeling socially supported and having a kind of strong social network, whether that be in the neighborhood, in the school, et cetera. But it really does take that trying to identify what can be used as a protective factor, especially if we're thinking about diminishing returns and socioeconomic resources not always being beneficial or as beneficial for certain population subgroups.
Okay, so the UK Biobank is really sort of a phenomenal resource. I would say that in the landscape of statistical genetics, it is sort of pushed genetic discovery and things we can do with genetics forward, 50 years in the 1 year that it was released, right? So it's an instrumental toolkit for statistical geneticists. I'm not sure what the time frame of the collection has been like, but I just know that the framework there is that the data should be available as often as possible to scientists with minimal barriers to access to get the data. And so I think the first step to think about when I think about what sort of large-scale genetic data efforts look like in the U.S. currently, I'm thinking about data sets like the Million Veterans Program, which is seeking to genotype 1 million veterans in the U.S. in sometimes very diverse samples. The All of Us data collection effort that's going on, the Broad Institute is doing a lot of the genotyping effort collections there. But in my sort of experience working with trying to get access to some of these larger or even smaller genetic data sets that are sort of US-based, there's a lot of barriers to getting access to the data. And so I think the first thing you have to do is think about how to make the data as easily accessible as data in the UK Biobank is. Otherwise, I think the resource will be limited to sort of the amount of discoveries that can be made in the data. And the second thing I would add is that There are some wonderful, well-phenotyped small data sets like AdHealth that have genetic data collected in them. Genetic data, as I showed you, is not so expensive to collect anymore, and I think it can be really valuable when we consider things like testing whether socio-demographic factors for polygenic scores might matter for something like that. So for program officers in the audience that are in charge of data sets or working with data sets, I'd say get the genetic data collected. It's not very expensive, so just do it because some of the phenotyping is very valuable in these small data sets.
You next. Wait. Over here, and then you, Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Rana Popkin from NICHD. And as a flip to an earlier question, I have a question for Robbie that's informed by Taylor's research. So Robbie, you mentioned that there's been kind of, concerns about the fact that a lot of this research is almost always done in people of European ancestry and how that's portable across groups of different ancestry. And also we know that ancestry is often used as a proxy for race, which we know in this room they are not the same, right? In a lot of these studies. And so I'm kind of wondering if you can discuss to what extent some of these correlation by environment interactions that you're talking about, are gendered, first of all, thinking about Taylor's work, right? And then also, how do we even begin to account for the existing kind of inequalities that we know exist by race, yet alone in an interactive model, when all of these studies are really done in people of European ancestry?
How to account for the problem that you discussed, which is, any sort of heterogeneity is often thrown into this term called stratification, population stratification in genetics. How to account for it is a really complicated question, and it's one a lot of smart people are beginning to think about and develop methods for. I think the answer is, we're far away from being able to solve the answer. The first part of your question had to do with things like by demographic characteristics, how gendered are things, for instance. This is actually a really exciting time for answering questions like that. How did genetic associations at the genome-wide level differ by things like sex or age? And so, in a similar fashion that I did, but in much larger data sets with much better phenotyping, people, especially at the Broad Institute, are beginning to really wonder what these differences look like. And so there are exciting studies that others and myself are part of, where we're taking every single phenotype in the UK Biobank, for instance, and splitting the GWAS by gender and seeing what the differences look like, splitting it by age bins. And I think the answer is that the demographic effects matter from a moderate to sort of a high level, which just sort of, I think, reinforces the points I was making about the portability of polygenic scores. One really interesting, though controversial piece that I've been heavily involved in for the last year or so is a new study on the genetics of same-sex sexual behavior. So if you really want a controversial piece, this will be one for the books, I think. But it's sort of fascinating to see, based on sort of how we know people enter into same-sex sexual behavior, the gendered barriers to doing so, the changes in the tolerance of diverse sexual expression over time, what sort of the changes in the genetic associations also look like. So there's lots of fascinating work going on in this area, and I expect that it'll just continue as we get better phenotyped and larger genetic data sets as well. But how to account for those things, that's a tough methodological question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Stephanie George. I'm at NIAMS, and I have a question for Olivia, informed by Marco. So everyone's making all these connections here, so you two are my question. The question is, Olivia, you talked a little bit about in terms of the community level for prevention and access to high-quality activities. So what are some of your top contenders for what those activities would be, and how might they interact with some of the things Marco mentioned about social as an alternative?
So the activities, thank you for the question. And the activities that we are talking and when we are working on this paper are the social interaction, but in the context of specific activity, like a high quality sports, where something like that. So if you go to the low income neighborhood, they have some sports that kind of healthy activity. But at the same time, when you look at the quality, what they do, they put everybody in a small little area, and there's no direct like interactive interaction between the coach and nurturing or nothing like that. Versus when you go to the high income neighborhood, there's really like well-trained coaches there, and interaction is happening, nurturing everyone. So those types of activities, what we're thinking. So the adolescents can engage deeply, and they can see that one is something that I can really enjoy and that I can do really well. So that this idea of substances that may function as this complementary, I don't need anything like that. This is satisfying enough, this is pleasurable enough, and I can hold on to one, and I can get the pleasure out of those. So those are the activities that we are thinking. Social aspect is a part of it, but what we are thinking is a really concrete activity. The children, the youth are really, really enjoying inherently, and then but improve their quality in the low-income neighborhood. That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a difference between the rat model and the human population because, as I showed in the video, the animal will press a lever and immediately receive a social interaction. So we still don't know what is really rewarding for the rat. I mean, we identify it as a social interaction, but it could be just the touch. As I showed you in the automatic version, even the touch seems to be enough to achieve the same attitude, the same result. So obviously, we wanted to go on the other side. We wanted to create 100% of the rat preferring social over drug, but there are different ways to reduce this social preference. For example, if you introduce a delay between the liver presses and the social interaction, the animal will start to switch for the drug because some of the animals are not willing to wait too much. And this is somehow translated to the community reinforcing approach because, as you know, in the community reinforcing, it's not 100% of people that get treated. Some of them will get the treatment because for some of them, that social community that stay on the table talking about something is not enough. And also there is another subpopulation of people, what we call people that self-identify with other addicted. For example, if you remove a person from their addiction cycle, they are like, I don't want other social interaction because my positive social interaction is to stay in the community that use drugs because I am accepted in the community, I am reinforced by the activity that we do together because for them, those activities are the rewarding activities. So if you remove the person and you bring home because you think this is the positive social environment, the person will be kind of negatively impacted from that event because for them, not necessarily what we define positive is positive for them. Actually, for some of them, bringing them to the positive social environment can be stressful because they don't have any more access to the drug. They are not accepted as is because, we need to be honest here. We have some stigma against people with substance use disorder. So even when we bring them to the social environment, we are always thinking, oh, he's an addicted. Instead, in the addicted cycle, they are accepted for what they are, and they like that. So it's kind of tricky. So what we want to do from our preclinical perspective is to reduce this gap, so have the entire spectrum from the 100% of rat preferring social to the rat that are switching for some other, like if we induce stress, if the animal is stressed, probably will go for the drug for some relief. We don't know yet. So, and then when we have everything established, we can go on the brain and see what are the mechanisms, different mechanisms for the 100% versus the no 100%.
Bill.
I also want to add my congratulations for the work you guys have done. I think it's not only important that you've asked novel questions, but you've challenged convention in the way we answer those questions. Particularly in Marco's case, if you're building modified Skinner boxes in your garage, that's some challenge to the typical convention. But for the other three of you, you've also challenged the convention about this sort of more static sense of how we understand phenotypes and thinking more about how those change over time and how the relationships change over time. And Robbie, I was particularly sort of struck by, I just hadn't thought about it before I read your paper, but the fact that educational attainment is obviously not a static process and that opportunities for educational attainment have obviously changed from 50 years ago to today. And in smoking cessation, we used to always say the reason we got from 40 to 20 so quickly, but then kind of plateaued out in terms of percent of smokers, is because we sort of took the cream off the top in the early days of smoking cessation interventions. And so all the people who smoked just because it was socially, acceptable and everybody did it, et cetera, we pretty easily sort of took care of those. But now we were left with sort of what we called the resistant or hardcore smokers. And so that phenotype's actually changed for us over the course of time, hasn't it?
Yeah, so that's right. So another interpretation of the work I do is that, phenotypes are variables, they're distributions. Sorry, phenotypes are just distributions, right? And that means that the underlying genetic associations will change as the distributions change. And so, another way to interpret what I do is that social norms, social policies push some of these phenotypes to sort of take on similar-looking distributions over time. And that's why we see sort of shared genetic influences sort of increasingly as we sort of alter those social policies or social behaviors. Yeah.
Terrific. Well, let's give all of our awardees a big round of applause. I want to present them with their certificates, and then they can come off stage, and I'll just give you a few announcements about transitioning from this to the next section. Terrific. Well, I'm between you and break, so I just want to tell you important break things. Down the hall on the right, before the elevators, is the ladies' room, and then after the elevators on the right is the men's room. And there's a cafeteria at the end, so if you need coffee, snacks, whatever, and you can get them there. And we will come back at 10:30. Is it 10:30 or 10:15? 10:30 promptly, and we will get started with the distinguished lecturer session of this half day. Thank you so much.
I'm Erica Spots from OBSSR, and I am also the chair of the Matilda White Riley Distinguished Lecturer Selection Committee. I should really probably find an acronym for that. But welcome to the 12th Annual Matilda White Riley Distinguished Lecture. The recipient of this award has a research career that has advanced behavioral and social scientific knowledge in areas within NIH's mission. The recipient's research also follows Dr. White Riley's vision through an expanded conceptualization of health and well-being that includes effective cognitive and social functioning and quality of life, behavioral and social sciences research results that improve the lives of people and society, illuminating the complex and dynamic interplay among processes at multiple levels, so interactions between genes and the built environment, natural and social environments, influence of social and behavioral factors on physical health and the utility of this knowledge for clinical practice and health policy, life course perspectives on development, health, and well-being of individuals and societies, and research approaches that build theory and methods in the advancement of knowledge on health and well-being. The NIH community nominates researchers for this award, and the recipient is then selected by a committee that I'm going to thank now. This committee comprises Anita Bechtold, Rebecca Campo, Rebecca Clark, Amelia Carricker, Bill Klein, and Lisa Onken. So if we could give them a brief round of applause for their work. This committee volunteers their time and effort to reading all of the nominations and then selecting one from among many deserving nominees. This is usually not an easy task. We often get a lot of really great potential speakers. It's now with great pleasure that I present you this year's Matilda White Riley Lecturer, Dr. Mark Van Landingham. He is the Thomas C. Keller Professor at Tulane University. He co-leads the International Health and Development Section and Program within the Department of Global Community Health and Behavioral Sciences in Tulane's School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. He's also been recognized extensively for his teaching and mentoring. Since you're not here to listen to me, I'll let you read more about his bio and his research online. I'll ask Dr. Van Landingham to come to the podium to receive his award and then to give his talk. So we have a plaque for you. She said, move the screen. Is that it? Nope.
definitely not it.
Let's try that way. That's much better. Okay. There we go. So I will let you. I'm gracefully do this.
Thank you, Erica. Do I really have to do this? I mean, that wasn't a difficult act to follow. That was an impossible act to follow. Congratulations to the early stage investigators. My head's still kind of going in a million different directions. I'd love to have an hour or a week with each of you. Really exciting research. Thank you to the Office of Behavioral and Social Science Research for hosting this event and honoring me with this award. I'm very grateful. It's really an especially big honor because several of my heroes coming through graduate school were prior honorees of this award, and it feels very incredible to be in that number, as we like to say in New Orleans, on the list of people who have received it. In my talk today, I'm actually going to build on some themes that some of these earlier honorees have established in this lecture. John McKinley talked a lot about upstream variables when he gave one of the early addresses. Linda Waite talked a lot about how our own individual health status is a function of these webs of social relationships that we find ourselves in or not. As in 2011, John Cacioppo talked a bit about how isolation also has really big impacts on our health and well-being as well. So I'm going to try to build on some of those topics as I introduce you to some work that I've been working on with students and colleagues that focuses on the role of culture in post-disaster recovery. In my talk today, I'm going to do a little bit of preaching to the choir. I promise it's not going to be very long. I kind of need to, one, because we as social scientists, I don't think we really drive home enough and often enough just how central behavior is to to health disparities, the global burden of disease, all these things. It's really, given an opportunity to do that, I always do. And I kind of need to say a few things that will be obvious to people in this room to kind of set up some things later on in my talk that are not quite so obvious. Love to tell stories, so I'm going to tell a short story about how I became interested in this body of work. It's still pretty new for me. Early part of my career was really focused on very, very, very different topics. But Katrina kind of changed everything, for me, both as a homeowner in New Orleans and also as a researcher. I'm going to make a case for culture being a neglected aspect of social structure that I think probably needs a lot more attention from people like us to kind of show its role and how social science and can really help to move forward this type of research. I'm going to give you some illustrations on this, and I'm going to wrap up by telling you some directions that I hope to go in next. Okay, this is the preaching to the choir part. Behavior is central to most major health outcomes, and behavior doesn't really make any sense unless you kind of put it in a social context. And shocking stuff, I know. So this is a chart out of the Global Burden of Disease. Most everybody in this room could recite it by heart. The top causes of premature morbidity and mortality. They change a bit from year to year. So I've got the 1990 rank and the 2017 more recent rank. That's not nearly as important or interesting as this, which is, again, no big surprise to people in this room, but this is actually a very conservative chart from the Global Burden of Disease about the role of behavioral risk, which they've highlighted in kind of a purple color here. In fact, all of these things, for all these things, behavior is front and center, behavior and social science are absolutely, big players in the global burden of disease and health disparities. So behavior matters, so does context. We as individuals, of course, we have agency. We make decisions about whether to, engage in exercise or, start on a healthier diet. But these decisions are, of course, embedded in all different layers of social structure. Our families, our peer networks, the types of resources that our communities and larger societies have. All right. That's it. That's the end of the lecture. That's the end of the preaching to the choir part of the lecture. where I'm going to move next is I've been doing a lot of thinking about culture recently, how to measure it, and then what role it might play in kind of informing some of these decisions that we as individuals make that have implications for our own health status. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why it has been so neglected in health research and even in the social sciences, and why I think it's important. So the way all this got started was back in the early 2000s, I had an early conversation with Rebecca Clark, my program officer, about this study that I wanted to do about selection effects on migration. And so most of you will know about the selection effects, but very briefly, I'm interested in immigrants and other types of migrants and sort of how the migration experience affects their health and well-being at destination. That's going to be driven, of course, by the move itself. People move to a new place and they're going to have kind of new resources and a different kind of life there. But it's also driven by the fact that people who decide to move are different from those who don't in the first place. So that's the selection part. So I was very interested in looking at this Vietnamese population that had moved to the U.S. post-1975 after the end of what we call the Vietnam War. So I had this kind of binational sample going, where I had a community in South Vietnam, people who had wanted to go to the U.S. but weren't able to. And then I also had this sample in New Orleans, which was one of the first places that the Vietnamese decided to settle when they first came to the U.S. And so that research went forward. It had very interesting results. That's a story for another day. But the part of the story that's relevant for this is I was collecting the data actually this is my second time to come to this, to the Office of Behavioral Science and Office of Behavioral Research, there it is, and Social Science Research. The first time was actually in 2003, where I came here early on to tell you about this binational study. So that one went forward, but just as we were starting to do the data collection in New Orleans, actually, just as we were finishing, we had it all scheduled for the summer of 2005, and as soon as we had completed the data collection, late in the summer of 2005 is when Katrina hit. And so I didn't really think much about this the study for several months. It's kind of my home flooded, the whole city flooded, we were displaced. It's kind of trying to figure out my own kind of what was going to go on for me personally. And as an academic at Tulane had flooded badly too. But as I was back in Texas drying out, I realized pretty quickly that this community of Vietnamese who were in eastern New Orleans had flooded very badly, and I was worried about them and wondering how things were going to turn out. But I also realized pretty early on that all of a sudden I had something really different, that was different from what I had originally intended. So I had, really good, relevant data of an immigrant enclave just before they flooded. That if I could follow them as a cohort, moving forward, I would have what most disasters, would like to have but don't, which is some information on how people were doing before a really, significant event like Katrina occurred to them. So that's what I decided to do. And the reason why that's really important is because, as you would guess, how people do after a major disaster like Katrina has a lot to do with how they were doing before. So if I could follow these families, moving forward, I would be able to say something about that. And it opened up a whole new research question for me, which is how do immigrants fare after a major disaster? And it turns out we don't really know much about that. I mean, immigrant communities tend to fly under the radar screen. They keep to themselves, don't draw a lot of attention to themselves. And then also, and this is kind of a problem for disaster research more generally, we don't really know when a disaster is going to happen, and so it's unusual to have pre and post disaster data. And all of a sudden, I was well positioned to do something about that. And so we did. And so about a year after Katrina happened, and about a year, so sorry, that was terrible. After we had collected the original, what ended up being the pre-Katrina wave, I found myself back in the field, and I remember this, specifically this particular interview, which was taking place in maybe September 2006. That's Lung Vu, a spectacular doctoral student who was working with me at the time interviewing this guy, and sort of in between, the interview was all in Vietnamese, and so in between, when he would kind of pause between various modules, had a chance to chat with a homeowner about how things were going. And for me at that time, it was a real dark period. I was fighting, really battle to the death with my insurance companies. They were offering to pay us maybe 20, 25 cents on the dollar Tulane was not doing well. Nothing was going right. The city government, state government, and federal government response to the disaster and the rebuilding of New Orleans was, hopelessly inept. I was really depressed, angry, having trouble sleeping. I was really not in a really good position. And so this guy had experienced all the things that I had. His home had flooded, his family were displaced, and he was also struggling with his insurance companies. But he decided to settle for them, for about 25 or 30 cents on the dollar. I was telling him, you're crazy, you shouldn't do that. And his attitude was completely opposite of mine. He says, are you kidding? He says, look, with the money that I got to rebuild my house. Wages have skyrocketed, so I'm working 2 jobs. He was getting ready to go to a Sarah leave shift, for his second job. That day he was rebuilding the house, with him and his friends, just as kind of a, just on their own. And so kind of the same set of circumstances, but he was on top of the world. He said, I've never had it so good. I'm buying a new car. Everything is going to be so much better afterwards. And so not long after the interview was completed, we completed the rest of the interviews, it turned out that he wasn't really unusual, that for the Vietnamese compared to blacks and whites in the city, they were actually faring much, much better in a lot of ways that I'll tell you about in a moment than everyone else was, especially me. And so my next question was, what's going on here? What is it about Vietnamese that might have given them a leg up to recover from a major setback like Katrina? And so in the project, the things I've been trying to push against, as a social scientist, is that there's a lot of kind of lay interpretations and things written for general audiences that emphasize or kind of portray, that also talk about culture and why some people or why some groups would do better than others, that are kind of fairly essentialist in nature, that's the way they are because that's the way they are. And so really want to kind of complicate that a lot more as a social scientist. And the other kind of major theory that was going around at the time was, well, it's because they had this really, when we had Ray Nagin, one of the worst mayors imaginable, who was proved to be hopelessly inept, leading New Orleans forward, and they had this Father Vian, this really charismatic, very capable priest. And said, it's a question of leadership. They got Vian, we got Nagin, but without kind of really thinking that, first of all, I think it's way too simplistic. And then also, why is it that a leader like that would emerge in the Vietnamese community rather than somewhere else? And so I also want to take a very critical perspective on culture. I didn't really know much about it. I had a little bit of exposure to the sociology of culture in graduate school, but had not really followed it very carefully since then. And then I also didn't know that much about what social scientists had to say about disasters, because I had not really thought very much about it until Katrina occurred. So one thing that happened, that was very fortuitous, during this, period was the Russell Sage. I applied for a sabbatical leave at the Russell Sage Foundation, which gave me a year to kind of go and immerse myself in these literatures and kind of find out, what disaster researchers were doing, and then how other social scientists, were dealing with topics like culture, recovery, and resilience. So what I'm going to do, for the, 30 minutes or so that I have to tell you about this study is I'm going to tell you about how I went about approaching this question about why the Vietnamese are doing so well. I'm going to try to convince you, in a short amount of time that the evidence suggests that they are. None of it's perfect, and all the different, types of evidence have their own kind of flaws, but it all kind of points in the same direction. So I'm going to give you a little bit of taste of that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the social sciences have to say about culture, resilience, and recovery. Propose a new conceptual framework that would incorporate some roles for culture in it, and then give you some examples. My approach is mixed. I have a lot of statistical data that tells you a little bit about, both before and after Katrina on health, well-being, socioeconomic status, things like that. And so we had the wave just before Katrina, 1 year after, 2 years after, 5 years after, and we just a couple of weeks ago finished the final wave of data. They hope the final wave of data collection. They're very tired of me. So we had several post-Katrina waves as well. And I have a lot of qualitative data where I went in and spoke with a lot of community leaders and other types of kind of what we call key informants about what was going well, what wasn't, and then their interpretations of that. And of course, I did a lot of reading and thinking about it during my year at Russell Sage. The main data that I have to sort of evaluate how the Vietnamese are doing compared to everyone else are those pre and post surveys, that we did at the time points that I've already mentioned. It's 125 families that we started off with. We've in the decade or so that's gone after that, we've re-interviewed I think 89% of those in at least one wave. And the way we just finished it, where we got out of the field, we got 70% of them for that final wave. A small cohort, but they've been very good about staying with us throughout the duration of the study. So my survey is focused on the Vietnamese, but there were lots of other teams in the area that were doing more population-based surveys of New Orleans is mostly black and white. It's black and white with a kind of a small smattering of Vietnamese, kind of clustered in one edge of the city. There's this displaced New Orleans residents study that was led by Narayan Sastry at Rand and the University of Michigan. And there's also this Gulf Coast Child and Family Health study at NYU that surveyed a lot of people in the part of the city where the Vietnamese live. It's mostly African Americans, so I'm able to do a lot of comparisons between the Vietnamese and the African Americans using those data. Told you about the key informant interviews. Then we have lots of qualitative data where we're doing some intergenerational studies. Just kind of overwhelmed with especially the qualitative data. So. With that kind of summary and recap, let me tell you a little bit about the Vietnamese and where they live. So this is Eastern New Orleans. It's not affluent, and it's also not especially poor. It's white collar and then blue collar, African Americans, like 95% African Americans. That's all the blue dots. And then you have this, very concentrated enclave of Vietnamese right at Land's End, kind of right at the very edge of the dry part of the city or the protected part of the city, where they're all clustered into this enclave way out in the east. This is what a typical house would be like. Becky and I came back to the city, pretty soon after. The people were allowed back in, and so I was able to get out to the community just to see how they were doing. Most of the houses looked like this. This was in the Vietnamese community, but it could have been anywhere. So the house, you can see the water line, not that much water, maybe a couple of feet, but it ruins everything. It ruins the floor, ruins the sheetrock. The car, is finished. Some roof damage. You can see the National Guard has been out, to get the dogs out, things like that. So what happens, in the house after it sits for a bit, is everything is wet, and so the mold rapidly takes over everything, and so that's why it becomes so expensive, even with a foot or two of water, which was pretty typical for out there. So, with that introduction and the recap of my central question, let me now kind of show you some of the evidence that convinced me, at least, that the Vietnamese actually are faring much better in post-Katrina New Orleans than other groups. In other words, I'm going to focus on the last part of my question, which is the so well part. So, how do disaster researchers assess who's doing well and who's doing not after a disaster? How do they assess recovery? Well, they kind of do it the way that you would think if we were going to come up with a model, just among ourselves. It would be something like this. It's pretty intuitive. You would want to know who's back, or are they back, in the houses that they started from. You're going to want to know about physical and mental health. You're going to want to know about employment, and you're also going to want to know something about how involved are they in their communities. And so one set of data that we looked at is rates of return. So this is a Kaplan-Meier curve. It's an LX curve, from the life table. Everybody starts off as everybody's displaced at the beginning, and then as time moves on, more and more people come back. You can see, and so the green is if whites came back early relative to the other groups. Blacks came back at a steady but a much slower rate. That's why New Orleans after Katrina became more white. It's still majority black, but it's less so than it was. Blacks were slower to return, and then kind of came back at not the same rates. And then you got the Vietnamese, in this blue line. They're kind of like the Energizer bunny. They just kind of kept coming and coming and coming and coming. And by 14 months, almost 90% of them were back. So they had a very robust, very fast, and very robust, rate of return. Some of the mental health results that we have, are really fascinating. One example is for PTSD. Some studies, Kessler's group, for example, were showing that people who had experienced flooding, and especially if they'd seen, really horrible things, in the aftermath of Katrina, about a third would show some symptoms of PTSD a year or so after the event. For the Vietnamese, it's low single digits, 3, 4, 5%, extremely low levels of PTSD. And then when we did something more systematic, to measure mental health of Vietnamese compared to their neighbors who had experienced same housing stock, same level of flooding, very similar socioeconomic status, and then we control for everything that we can think of. This is the SF-12 measure, the mental health summary score. The Vietnamese still come out, with a bonus, in terms of, their mental well-being. Again, not perfect, but all the evidence on mental health points in the same direction. The social role measures. Before Katrina, the Vietnamese community was kind of your typical immigrant enclave. People kind of stuck to themselves. They weren't, very involved in sort of more general New Orleans society. It's very difficult to find groups to work with because there really weren't any. There was the Catholic Church, and that was basically it. All of that changed after Katrina. You had a variety of different community groups that rose up and became very, very prominent, and they were also very successful. One of the brilliant things that the city, state, and federal government did soon after Katrina was decide to put a toxic landfill right next to the Vietnamese community, thinking that they wouldn't complain, but they did. They mobilized very quickly, got a lot of assistance, from outside. And were effective in shutting it. I didn't think they had a chance, but they made them shut it down. A big success, for one of the big NGOs that developed there, or community-based organizations that developed there after Katrina. New Orleans has maybe 10 or 12,000 Vietnamese, and so everybody had been waiting on Southern California or maybe Houston. Southern California has maybe 700,000 Vietnamese living there. Houston has maybe 100,000 or 200,000 folks, and they've been waiting for the first Vietnamese congressperson. Where does it come from? New Orleans, in the post-Katrina era. The first Vietnamese American congressman, and the first time that seat had gone to a Republican, since the 1890s. So there was a lot of, this massive organization in the community, starting right after Katrina. I could show you some unemployment rates, that compares Vietnamese, to the other groups. It all goes the same way. Just very different trajectory of recovery, much more positive than blacks or whites. So let me just talk a little bit about the social science literature and how it deals with trying to figure out, who's going to do well and who's not after a major disaster like Katrina. In other words, I'm going to focus on the why part of this question. Why do some groups fare better than others? The central paradigm, as I discovered, as I kind of got into this field, is one of resilience. And so social scientists and disaster researchers in particular use this resilience paradigm to try to, the flip side of it is vulnerability. So how resilient or vulnerable a community is before a disaster will be very predictive of how well they do after disaster. So we all kind of have a good intuitive sense of what resilience is. It's kind of your ability to bounce back after a setback. And this is Fran Norris's model, and she's a bit more formal in her development of it. But it's basically, again, what we would come up with. The types of resources that a community would be associated with a high level of resilience would be money, in economic activity, social networks, how well information flows throughout the community, and then she calls it community competence, but it's clear she's talking about human capital. The problem is that when I kind of put these in both a formal or just kind of informal way of thinking about it, the Vietnamese end up being really different from everybody else in the recovery, but on all these things that should matter, all these dimensions of resilience, there wasn't any kind of real way, nothing that really distinguished them. Their social networks were really tight and useful within the Vietnamese community, but they were very isolated from the rest of New Orleans, quite modest economically, not very poor. I mean, there's the differentials, of course, but all in all, not very different from the communities that surrounded it. And so the resilience model didn't seem to hold up very well. So that left me with a question about why that would be. And as I kind of started thinking more and more about well, what is it that distinguishes the Vietnamese from their neighbors? I kind of dawned on me that it's because they're Vietnamese, stupid. I mean, that's basically it. And by being Vietnamese, what I mean by that is that they, as a group, share a particular history of things that they went through, and then that history kind of gives them a way of viewing the world that's going to be very distinct from the other groups. And clearly, I'm talking about culture here. And so, again, back to my pulpit facing the choir. Everybody knows this, but just to fix ideas, and to remind you what we as social scientists mean when we talk about culture. It's these symbolic systems of what people believe, what they value, and how they interpret the world that makes it meaningful to them as a particular group. And I've got this, of course, it doesn't just magically appear, but people have to construct these ideas. And so they got me thinking about, well, why is it that social scientists have been so skittish about incorporating culture into their models? And I had several conversations with my anthropologist colleagues and also with Fran Norris about this, about why she seems to be kind of going to great lengths not to talk about culture. And the answer became really clear that I think so many social scientists were so wounded by what happened in the 60s and 70s and were so appalled by culture kind of being a way of blaming the victim for their own poverty and their own bad luck, is that studies of culture went through a real dark period, in the late 70s, 80s, and even through the early 90s. It wasn't until maybe a couple of decades ago that social scientists kind of started to return to it and say, yeah, it's very fraught politically. In fact, a lot of my review proposals to NIH and other organizations, when I was kind of proposing some of this work, one common comment that I would get is that, well, you're going to end up lionizing one culture and kind of disparaging, the other one. And yeah, I get that, but I kind of came to the conclusion that this shared history is going to be so important, for the Vietnamese. There's kind of really no way to kind of avoid doing it. So I decided I'm going to really jump in and see what I can make of it. So a lot of the effort that I've expended in kind of trying to move forward, this idea that culture is going to be important to disaster recoveries, is to try to distinguish it from other features of social science that are kind of more akin to privilege. And I think this is where a lot of the kind of more popular depictions of this argument go awry. Amy Chua, for example, in her work on the tiger mothering and the triple package, doesn't really go to make much of an effort at all to kind of unpackage culture, this kind of the kind of interpretive part of it, from other things that are correlated with it that are more akin to privilege. I mean, the fact that so many immigrants from Vietnam and elsewhere who come to the U.S. are from the cream of the crop, the absolutely 1% of 1% of India and China, Mexico, and other places, and Vietnam. The people who come here are selected for success and kind of have a lot of, if not money, skills and kind of right kind of risk-taking personalities that are going to make them succeed. And so that's what I mean by this piece of cultural confounders that I've tried to separate out. So let me tell you just a little bit about the history and the culture of this group of Vietnamese that ended up in New Orleans after the fall of Vietnam in 1975. This group is very Catholic. That's one of the reasons why they chose New Orleans as a place to settle in. And they actually came from South Vietnam, but they see their original roots as coming from the north. There's a couple of villages about 100 miles south of Hanoi that I got to visit when I was spending some time in Vietnam on a Fulbright. And so this is a really famous temple, from these two villages, where they were from, and you kind of see that they kind of took the French, very stout, types of traditional French architecture and kind of put these Asian flourishes on it to make it meaningful to them. And so in 1954. When the North went communist and the South was going to become a republic, about 1 million Vietnamese left the North because they were afraid of being persecuted by the communists. So this was their first big displacement. Entire villages kind of up and left and went to this place, close to Saigon called Vung Tau, where they settled for the next couple of decades. And then they had another displacement. So there they were until South Vietnam fell, and then the communists were going to take over their entire country. And so this led to the massive exodus that we often call the boat people that took place in the late 70s and early 80s. And so New Orleans was one of the first places where to settle when they first came to the U.S. because of its French heritage, and it was Catholic, and there were some economic opportunities there for them with regard to fishing and shrimping. And so this is a picture of the community out there in eastern New Orleans. It flooded very heavily, during Katrina, as I said, but then they all came back, soon afterwards. So I'm going to propose a conceptual framework, to incorporate, some of these features of culture, and then give you a few examples. So I've actually decided that I think, rather than kind of being a dimension of resilience itself, that, culture probably belongs to, to the left of it. And the reason why is that most of the things I can kind of think of, as kind of being akin to culture, like religious beliefs, for example, couldn't in and of themselves, lead to better recovery. It has to kind of work through some of these other dimensions of resilience, like, having, solidifying your social networks at church or something like that, so you can kind of get a work crew to kind of come out and work on your house. So I've got, culture out to the left, as a separate variable. And then I've got these, culture confounders that I want to give you a few examples of those, because I think they really, can muddy the waters if you're not careful. So one set of these, confounders that I think, really get mixed up with culture, and I think it's part of the reasons why, another part of the reasons why social scientists don't spend that much time on it, is selection, which I think I've already, covered enough. But also, there are some other things that the Vietnamese community had going for it that really have nothing to do with culture that I think gave it some, some advantages. It's pretty small. Everybody kind of knows everybody, at least kind of tangentially, whereas and then there's kind of one central church, there that not everybody is a member of, but people are going to go there for, the big festivals and community meetings and things like that. So it's kind of manageable. Whereas the African American community, in contrast, lots of really small churches, no kind of big place for anybody to, to meet, and way too large for folks to kind of get to, get into diverse, for people to kind of get to know each other. Another thing that I realized in reading through, especially a lot of my transcripts of Vietnamese and then also donors and other groups who had worked with them, is this idea of stereotype promise was also a really important piece of it. People expect the Vietnamese to succeed. It's kind of like the opposite of negative stereotypes, and so a lot of research will show that kind of if you have two applicants for a job or for a rental unit, and one of them is African American, and the other one isn't, that the employer or the landlord will always, select against the African American. So the Vietnamese kind of have the opposite of that. Everybody kind of expects them to succeed, and donors in particular, people who are kind of coming out, looking for a place to, invest in post-Katrina New Orleans would often choose the Vietnamese community. They're very transparent about it, because they were seen as worthy. They thought that it was going to be successful, and so this kind of image of them being hard workers and deserving kind of builds on each other. So this idea of stereotype promise ended up being a really big factor. And then they're kind of immigrant things that would benefit immigrants more generally that have nothing to do with culture. Birds of a feather, kind of living close to each other, that share a language. They're going to help each other in times of crisis just because they have this commonality. That's also an effect, well known in the literature on immigrant effects. Nothing to do with culture, but it is something that really benefited the Vietnamese. So in contrast, with that, let me talk a little bit about what I'm really kind of putting in the culture basket. Back just for a second. So again, to remind you, the definition is beliefs, values, and shared understandings that render the world meaningful and intelligible for a particular group of people. As I started working through what social scientists have done with culture over the last couple of decades, it's this last piece of it that's received the most attention, these shared understandings. The reason why is that most quantitative researchers really like the beliefs and values part of it, and they weren't really getting anywhere, with it, because most people kind of want the same. It doesn't vary that much. People want their children to do well in school, and they believe that hard work pays off. So all these things that you can easily quantify aren't particularly helpful because you don't really, get much purchase on it. And the shared understandings part is a much more difficult nut to crack. It's messier, kind of more interpretive, not really so amenable, to a quantitative response. So most of the really good work in culture has been done by more qualitative sociologists over the past decade or two. And so I've been focusing on that, especially the shared understandings part. And there's kind of 4 different categories, that they've been working on, or 4 different dimensions of these shared understandings. One is a set of narratives that people tell, or people share, not only kind of within a generation, but especially across generations, that kind of tell the story about where the community came from, what makes it tick, and what are its key characteristics. And so that's the narratives piece of this aspect of culture. Another dimension of it is what culture scholars are calling these symbolic boundaries, where people within the group will go to a lot of trouble and expend a lot of psychic energy on distinguishing us from them. And so I got a lot of this, in my interviews, and they're not very kind, to people who are not very, very Vietnamese. And they'd kind of get going on some things, and they'd say, "Oh, sorry." I'm going, "No, it's okay. I just tell me what you think," But they're very critical of kind of more stereotypical American views of child rearing, for example, way too permissive, not enough, parental control. People talk way too much. Americans can't control their mouths. We're not like that. We're very different. And so a lot of effort in kind of, creating these symbolic boundaries between, who's the differences between Vietnamese and others. This idea of frames is one of my favorite ones. It often will kind of come from, keep doing that. These narratives, this shared history that they've experienced, that'll kind of give them a particular way of viewing the world that'll be very different from somebody who didn't share that same history, for them. I'll give you a couple of examples of that in a moment. I think it'll be more clear. And then Ann Swidler's done a lot of work on these cultural toolkits, which are these repertoires of behavior that are pretty culturally specific. So I'll give you a couple of examples of each one of those. So as I was kind of analyzing, so this is all qualitative work, where I'm working with graduate students, where we're going through these transcripts and then independently coding kind of what we find, and they can sort of see if we kind of have some overlap with what we discern out of them, and we do actually. The overlap, it's pretty, was pretty impressive. So one narrative that we identified is one that I've called survival. This idea that the Vietnamese would tell these stories, or as they're describing themselves, they would describe themselves as a group that continually faces hardship. Not surprising, given their history from leaving the North and then leaving Vietnam and then having to evacuate for Katrina and then coming back. So part of their identity as a group is this idea that we experience hardships and we overcome them. And then so there was a lot of this kind of talk, when Katrina happens. This is just another hardship. We'll get through it. Give you a couple of examples of frames. This one I call insularity. So when people like me, we're really just indescribably upset and demoralized, by the failure of all institutions, government institutions, terrible experience, with, contractors, big and small. Everybody, nobody was, nobody was fulfilling their obligations that they had, declared responsibility for. And so I was completely demoralized, by that, especially in the first year or two after Katrina. In contrast, when I talked to my Vietnamese, key informants, they would, sometimes I would kind of whine about, just how bad things are going. And so their perspective is, what do you expect? Of course, the cavalry is not coming, so, and it never has and it never will. And it was really clear that coming from a very dysfunctional and corrupt environment that was South Vietnam, before they came to the U.S., the last thing you would want is for the government or the police to be coming into your neighborhood. So they brought that view of institutions to the U.S. I'm not advocating it, but I'm saying that kind of gave them, prepared them well for what was to come, which was the cavalry wasn't coming. They were right, and so they didn't wait. They kind of, pulled together their own resources and put together their own work crews and kind of moved forward while the rest of us were kind of sitting around wringing our hands. Another frame that's one of my favorites that I don't have up here is one that I call hierarchy. And so the Vietnamese are very comfortable with hierarchy. And a couple of my students have described Vietnamese family structure as father knows best on steroids. You absolutely, the head person makes the decision, everybody else falls into line. So there was a lot of squabbling and discussion, after Katrina about whether to come back, what to do, So there were some disagreements, but once they decided what was going to happen, and then the leadership, especially the priests, but also some of the old military leaders, kind of decided, okay, discussion's over. This is what we're going to do. They were very comfortable in falling into line and moving forward on that. In contrast, the rest of us couldn't decide anything. We had 450,000 free agents, trying to figure out, what are we going to do for ourselves? Which neighborhoods are going to be, rebuilt. And again, I'm not advocating, hierarchy as a way to restructure society. I'm just saying that, this frame kind of positioned them well, for kind of, moving forward in this environment, where there's little leadership. I've talked a lot about symbolic boundaries. I won't belabor that. So what I'm going to, where I'm moving next, with this body of research is, I'm really, so at this point, I think some of the stuff that's kind of more interesting for me is very qualitative, where I'm kind of reading through these transcripts, trying to interpret them, and trying to kind of come up, with some schemes or some ways to kind of label these kind of messy pieces of culture. But I'm a quantitative demographer, and so I really do want to just figure out some ways to move forward in a more quantitative approach, mostly because I think for it to be generalizable and not just interesting for the Vietnamese, there needs to be some ways to kind of make this kind of more transferable to other communities and other situations. So a few things that I'm looking at is we actually have some really good information on acculturation. These measures exist already. Basically, it's to what degree do the Vietnamese or anybody else kind of more identify with Vietnamese food, language, and social context versus a more Americanized version of it. So that's working really well. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and that already exists. So that's one way to kind of move forward to kind of make this line of research more generalizable. Is that there's a lot that we can do with acculturation. I've also been thinking a lot about ethnic capital, this idea of, these measures of to what extent does an individual have buy-in with being African American or being Vietnamese or being, from Guatemala. So there's some measures of that, that I think, are promising. But what I'm most excited about is this cultural consensus theory. I was at University of Texas Medical Branch before coming to Tulane, and one of my favorite colleagues there was Sue Weller. So she and one of her colleagues, Romney, have done a lot of work on cultural consensus theory throughout, for several decades, where they're essentially they go in and kind of take a qualitative approach at first to try to identify some kind of key defining beliefs and understandings within the community, and then there's some mathematical ways to get a sense to assess to what degree are these understandings shared throughout the community. So, moving forward, I'm hoping to kind of take these kind of very amorphous, abstract ideas of culture and acculturation, and then kind of work on trying to make it a bit more generalizable and quantitative. So a few conclusions to wrap up. I've concluded, from a decade or so of working on this, that culture does influence or has influenced the recovery trajectory of the Vietnamese community after Katrina. I'm finding that the more kind of delve into these studies of culture, the more complicated it is. Very easy to mix it up with other aspects of social structure, that really have kind of nothing to do with culture, and it can be kind of dangerous to kind of to conflate the two. There's that. And then I do think that if it's going to really be very useful, I think this is pretty interesting, for the Vietnamese community. I think it is. I hope you do too. But to be very useful as a social science construct, I think that it needs some work to make it more generalizable, so to be applicable to other situations as well. If anybody was interested in more reading, I finally finished a book on the topic called Weathering Katrina. It's available from Russell Sage Foundation Press. You can get it on Amazon too. And this kind of short version of it is I had an opportunity to do an op-ed on the topic a year or two ago. And so it's just really beautiful photographs, and it's kind of a summary of the argument. I want to close by thanking the funders of my research, especially NIH, who've been very generous to me, starting from that first R of 3, that led to the cross-national study, and then an R21 to kind of show that, no, I really can go out and find these Vietnamese again, or I think I can, to go and convince them to stay in the study. So NIH has really been instrumental in this, but also Fulbright, Russell Sage Foundation. My home institution, Tulane, has also been very generous as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. I know that I've always shied away from culture because it seems like in the behavioral and social sciences, which is already a little bit sticky and touchy, the culture is like really sticky, but this was excellent. I just really enjoyed this talk. I'm sure there are questions. Oh, come now. Yeah, can you come to the, I know, we can't hear you otherwise, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That should work. Yes, he just turned them on, so that should work.
Okay, 2 questions. The first one is maybe easier. The original decision to go to New Orleans, you mentioned the Catholic identity, the French ambiance. Who made those decisions and how was that disseminated? That's one. The second one, in terms of the dynamics of culture, you've talked about a hierarchical world. You've talked about a paternalistic world. These Vietnamese younger people are probably going to public schools. They are probably using social media. They are probably very much aware of patterns and tendencies in various circles on feminist issues, on hierarchy. What would that mean for their resilience in another disaster?
Both are great questions. First one's pretty easy. The second one's pretty hard. I'll do the easy one. Maybe I'll forget the hard one. The way that the decision was made was by the priests. So it's kind of an interesting story. When the Archbishop in New Orleans at the time, you heard that the Vietnamese had been, so it was the elite who came first. It was the leaders of the military, government, and the business leaders who were afraid of being killed. For siding with the Americans, and probably with good reason. So the Americans actually airlifted them out, and so this was started in April of 1975 and went on throughout the year. And so Fort Chaffee in Arkansas was where they flew them in, and they're just kind of wondering, what are we going to do with these people? And they were kind of waiting for various communities. They were going to spread them, try to spread them out, throughout the country at first, and waiting for communities to kind of step up and say something. So the Archbishop went to Fort Chaffee, and a lot of things happened that were very fortunate, for the Vietnamese and for us, in New Orleans. So New Orleans, like a lot of cities, was facing a pretty steady population decline through the 60s and 70s. We were maybe 700,000 or so in the 1960s, and we were probably maybe around 500,000 or so by the time the Vietnamese came in. So there was a lot of really good, cheap, unoccupied housing, a lot of Section 8 housing that was available, for the Vietnamese, and a lot of it was clustered out in this, enclave out in eastern New Orleans. And so the Archbishop said, "I know you're Catholic, I know you're French, so are we. We are the French Catholic city in America. We'll take whoever wants to come." And so especially the church hierarchy, I don't think I had to think very long to decide that there's a really good opportunity here. Geographically, it's pretty similar to the Mekong Delta as well. And then there were some the fishing and shrimping industry was not kind of fully. I'm sure that the black and white shrimpers would probably argue this, but there was some opportunity there for growth. In the Vietnamese were able to a few of them used something about it, and so that was kind of an early niche for them. So that's how they ended up in New Orleans. The second generation is something I'm really interested in, because this is a problem that most immigrant communities have. Is the leadership in the first generation is usually pretty clear. In the Vietnamese, it's going to be the church hierarchy and the former military leaders, and there's something similar to that in other immigrant communities. But then as the second generation goes to public schools, they become much more comfortable in English, rather than in Vietnamese, and they're youngsters. They're not taken very seriously by the elders. That became really really interesting after Katrina as well. So as the community had been very isolated, before then, but as government, contractors, insurance people started to come into the community, and they need somebody to kind of with some language expertise and also some American savvy, to be able to talk to them. They had to go to their children, for help with it. And so that was a real shot in the arm, for the second generation. And actually, a couple of really good and powerful community-based organizations, from the second generation emerged as a result of it. That I don't think would have happened, without Katrina.
Hi, my name's Amit Mistry. I work here at the Fogarty International Center here at NIH. I was wondering I wanted to ask you more about your research approach before and after the disaster, and how you found, do you have to change methodologies, community engagement? How did you change your research working with populations after the hurricane compared to your work with the same communities before?
I guess the first thing to say is that, I'd had a little bit, it became really clear to me that a lot of this was going to be interpretive, and that the statistical data wasn't going to be, it was useful, but it wasn't going to be useful in answering the kind of questions that I wanted to. I was kind of really more interested in what people were thinking and how they were interpreting, the recovery process and then the negotiation process, within the community. So I needed to have these kind of long-winded conversation, with people, somewhat structured but somewhat not. And so I became, much more interested in learning in vivo and learning about coding and intercoder, reliability. So that was one direction, that I went into afterwards. Fortunately, a lot of the outcomes that I was interested in for this kind of original cross-national, study, depression, employment, health status, ended up being also perfectly relevant, for a post-disaster study as well, which was lucky because I wanted to kind of exploit the pre-Katrina data and have the same measures, on the other side as well. So that part of it didn't change so much. I'd not done much longitudinal, research until then, and so kind of trying to figure out the magic of keeping people interested, and especially with our small sample, it was representative, of the whole community. But it was an R03. Actually, it was one of 3 samples in an R03. So that's why it's 125 people. It was, it was really small because we had, very little money, to deal with. But you lose anybody on that, you're really in trouble. And so, we did everything, we could to try to maximize community buy-in with a lot of briefings and a lot of conversations, showing up, to a lot of these, festivals, and actually having students come, Vietnamese students from the community who were interested in public health. You're coming in and working on the project helped a lot. And then I was able to hire, someone from one of the major CBOs to come and work at Tulane to kind of to help kind of pave the way. But that was a huge challenge, trying to keep people in.
Hi there, my name is Erin, and I work at the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm just curious if in your study, I recognize it was a smaller N, but were you able to look at different subsets, possibly persons with disabilities or the elderly, people who are traditionally vulnerable during disasters, and if there's something about the culture that protected those people, and if we could take pieces of that and transfer it to other communities as well?
The short answer is no. So it was. We could kind of, since it was going to be so. I'll have a lot to say anyway. But the short answer is no. So we knew the sample was going to be small, so we tried to make it as homogeneous as possible in terms of age, as we could. So it was a working age. Population, no children, no older adults. So we could kind of have at least some statistical power. To talk about that particular group. But I got really interested in the second generation, from just kind of, working in the community. So I'm still kind of thinking about, what we might do next to kind of look at how that second generation moves forward, maybe especially, in light of a disaster where their skills become, much more highly valued there. So working on a couple of ideas there. And NIA was very generous to give us a supplement this year to do some work on the elderly in the community on cognitive decline. And so one of the questions that we're really interested in, and one of the questions in studies of cognitive decline is, what the relationship might be of prior trauma with the onset of cognitive decline. And this older population is a highly traumatized population where either as civilians or soldiers, they experienced really horrific things in South Vietnam, towards the end of the world. Many of them saw combat. Many of them saw horrible things as they were coming by boat or overland, during the illegal exodus. They were trying to get out of Vietnam. Katrina was bad, but not nearly as bad as those things. But anyway, they've suffered a number of traumas, and they're just really interesting. I mean, they were, in a lot of ways, I think the community's greatest generation, where they were very successful in Vietnam, kind of came over with, they had lost everything in Vietnam, and then kind of reestablished, these very vibrant communities, here. So in spite of all these hardships, they've been very successful. So that's actually another area where I'm hoping to go next. Is that I'm really eager to do some work, on this older community.
Hi, Amelia Carricker. I'm at the National Institute on Aging. It was lovely. So my question is really about the sort of ending discussion that you had here about the quantification or it's almost like quantification of culture sounds bad in some ways, but it's a sort of question that we're grappling with as the United States becomes increasingly diverse. And NIA, one of the things we're thinking about, of course, is like, how do we measure is there cultural consensus about, for example, norms about caregiving? I mean, what are your ideas on sort of the process of how we would develop these measures? And are they sort of domain specific? So, for example, a caregiving kind of question, or are there is this something that can be, is there a generalized suite of questions that you could think about?
Yes, I'm just starting to kind of dive back into this literature. I knew a little bit about it, when I was at Texas a couple of decades ago. But from what I recall about it, I think that it does actually have various domains of knowledge, where they'll kind of try to kind of figure out how people are kind of are starting to how they interpret setbacks, how they, what they value in terms of trying to move the community forward. I don't think it could ever be completely quantitative, because I think you need to have these conversations and kind of get people talking kind of comfortably and naturally about some of these things before maybe something kind of pops up and you got to go, oh, you're the third person who mentioned whatever it might be. So I don't think it's a total kind of move away from qualitative methods to quantitative methods. In fact, one of the things I found really fun about this group is I've been able to attract a number of colleagues with skills in different types of methodologies to work on this, where we're all kind of talking about this same broad topic, but also using various methodologies to go at it.
Hi, Mike Sterrett from the NIMH, and thank you so much for your fascinating work and talk. It's a related question. We have ourselves at NIH and so many of the investigators that we fund who are looking into determinants of health and health behavior. And we do frequently look at the levels that are, behavioral and social. You make such a compelling argument about including the cultural in that mix. And so I just wonder what your recommendations are to us and to other researchers about how they can better fold attention to the cultural in the research studies that they're planning and conducting. What are the methodological tools that would be best for accomplishing that?
So the cultural consensus, work is something that I have a lot of excitement about. I don't really have a good, firm enough grip to answer the question on it yet. But my sense is that that's going to go someplace. I think I could give a more solid answer for the ethnic capital, idea. Lots of social scientists are working in that, and it seems to be really important. The degree to which a person feels invested in his or her community, that the kind of more they feel invested in their identity as a Latino, for example, seems to correlate very highly with being able to kind of draw upon resources from that particular community. So I think the ethnic capital idea is moving forward, and there's some really good promise there. I've really enjoyed working on some of these acculturation measures that I think would work well with any immigrant group. The degree to which they are kind of more comfortable with American friends, language, and food versus whatever it was back in the home country. Also, kind of seems to have a lot of implications for access to health care. For example, that it seems that as the Vietnamese, I mean, it's all very messy, but also very interesting that the Vietnamese in the time after Katrina actually became much better in their language ability. I think by virtue of kind of having to interact with so many more mainstream American entities that they were able to successfully avoid, before Katrina, but they became much less comfortable doing so. So they kind of became much more keen to just to narrow their focus, their social interactions among themselves, and even with regard to food, to become much more Vietnamese, even as they kind of became more familiar with and adept, with more mainstream, American society. And so before Katrina, this kind of very strong Vietnamese affiliation had really negative implications for access to health care, but which kind of makes sense because they weren't really comfortable, interacting with the American system, but afterwards it became less so because they became much more capable of doing it, even if they didn't want to.
Thank you. Hey, Dr. Van Manningham, thank you again. Congratulations again on your award. This is a really fantastic talk, and congratulations on the bad luck of being able to conduct a study in the middle of disaster. My question actually links to earlier questions, one about the resilience on future disasters in this population that somebody asked earlier, and this question about second generation immigrants, second generation Vietnamese families. So in 2009 or so, Wei Li et al. From Tulane did a study from a population perspective that mapped migration flows of Vietnamese out of New Orleans, along with African Americans and non-Hispanic whites, and then their return migration. They found the same pattern that you presented in your Kaplan-Meier plot, with very accelerated return migration amongst those first-generation Vietnamese families. My question is, do you think that return acceleration was the result of them having no alternatives? They had to come basically back here because their African American and white counterparts had family and friends and social networks that were sort of broadly distributed around the region that they could stay with for longer periods of time. So that's the first part. And the second part is, do you think that the second generation now has built these sort of ties that if there were, and there will be, another disaster in New Orleans affecting this community, that they would then be able to rely upon in these sort of ancillary regions around New Orleans?
It was a really hard decision, because Houston is where many of us went, after Katrina, and it has a very large Vietnamese community there that welcomed the Vietnamese. Actually, they welcomed all of us with open arms. But the Vietnamese in particular had places to go, and so they had real kin. And then there's this idea of fictive kin, where they all kind of feel like they're kind of cousins, informally anyway. And so it was really clear that as I spoke with them, that staying in Houston was a very attractive option, for them, because they had no idea. The city was not doing well at all, and especially out where they were, out in eastern New Orleans, it was going to be, it was the last on everybody's, radar list. And so it was a very difficult decision for them to come back. And my sense was that, in speaking with them, that there was a lot of very heated debate about whether they go back as a community at all. And there were some individual decisions, of course. Some people did end up, in Houston or Southern California or elsewhere because they decided it was best for their family. But what I found remarkable was once they kind of, the switch flipped and they decided, no, we're going back. That then they what everybody would say is that, hey, the priest said we're going back. We're going back. And so, and they did very quickly, kind of at the same time. And of course, they're kind of very tightly networked and everything. So they would kind of go back and kind of work on each other's homes and rebuild and kind of. And there was also a community on the unflooded West Bank that gave them a staging area where they could have stayed over there too. But one story that several of them told about why they decided to do that. Well, first of all, the reason why it was hard is because things weren't looking good for New Orleans and for their children. The economy doesn't really offer a lot of attractive jobs for them, and children are doing very well. In school, they're not going to work in fishing, or kind of or blue collar jobs. They're going to have, they're engineers, and doctors and scientists, and so there aren't that many opportunities there for them. So they're very worried about. And the schools were also really in rough shape too, coming back. So it was a very difficult decision. But once they decided they were going to do it, they decided as a group, to come back. So anyway, the story that's often told is that many of the families are multi-generational. So the kind of folks around my age, came back first. That was kind of the first generation that kind of got the community settled. And then they had kids in the U.S., but then they brought their elderly parents over eventually from Vietnam as well. And so many times they would say, my parents say they're not moving again. This is their home. They did it once. I wouldn't mind going someplace else, but they say no. And so I think that was, it's just a story, but I heard it several times, and it kind of had some traction with me.
Yes. Sorry.
Maybe you could take it out.
No, I think it's okay now. I'm Sudha Shivram from the Center for Global Health at the NCI. So thank you so much for your lecture. And I'm really fascinated by the shared understandings component of the definition of culture. And I'm thinking, you talked about Katrina, but I was also thinking, I guess the BP disaster followed soon after, right? The Deepwater Horizon.
Yes, about 5 years after.
Yeah, so in your post-Katrina interviews, did you see any evidence, perhaps from the qualitative interviews, as to how some of the components of the dimensions of shared understanding, like, us versus them, or you talked about framing, did that change in any way in terms of kind of being more resilient in response to something now that directly affected only their livelihood as compared to Katrina that affected the larger population of the city?
Yeah, good question. Kind of hard to answer. But let me try it this way. So, when the Vietnamese first came over, there was this kind of niche that was available for them in fishing and shrimping, and a few of them knew enough about it, and they pulled resources and bought some boats, worked all the time, and made a lot of money, and then were able to kind of pull their kind of friends and neighbors, into the industry too. And it's still a pretty important part of the Vietnamese economy, but much less so now, and much less so, when Katrina hit, where it had become much more diverse by that time, where they were kind of doing everything. So, proportionately kind of more in fish and shrimping than the white and black population, but not so heavily involved in it. And so whether the BP Deepwater Horizon incident might have changed some of your feelings of resilience, I don't know, but I kind of think so, or maybe these things that I've been talking about position them well for saying, well, it's just another setback, that it will eventually recede, or we'll kind of go someplace else, or work harder, just to make ends meet. But I don't have any firm data on that.
So I have one final question before we turn things over to our director. You touched on this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how all this research started. I mean, you talked about R03s and R21s, and I think it might be important to emphasize that this didn't all get started with some big center grant or something like that.
Yeah, again, I'm really grateful to NICHD in particular, for having confidence in the research, and also for having these mechanisms that are available for junior researchers, like I was at the time. I mean, it was really risky. This especially this cross-national study. Whether it was going to fly or not. We didn't know. And when I was talking the idea over, with Rebecca Clark, she said, well, this is kind of a classic high risk, high reward, and you've got a shot at it. For an R03, an R01, forget it. There's no way. There's no way. You don't have the track record. It's kind of too high risk. An R03, it still has to be good, but you got a shot at it. And so kind of going for the kind of smaller ticket awards and trying to build something from that, where you kind of show proof of concept, to kind of go for something a little bit later on. I was coached very well by Dr. Clark on that. I'm very, very appreciative of that too.
Thank you so much for an end to a wonderful morning. And I guess, Bill, you have a few final comments, or? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Good. First of all, join me again in thanking both an excellent distinguished lecturer this year for our 12th year, Mark Van Landingham. And what I think, again, this has probably only been our third or fourth year of doing this, but the early stage investigator paper awards I thought were just exceptional this year, as they've been every year before. So join me in thanking them as well. I have to say one point that Mark made at the beginning of his presentation and at the end in the last question that I think is always really important for every investigator to hear was, I talked to my project officer. It's kind of an important thing. It's something that we think is really important at the NIH, and I think it helps people not have a lot of mistakes early in their careers they're trying to figure out, and even later in their careers, they're trying to figure out what to do next and how to do it. I really want to thank, as I said before, there were 500 papers that came in for the 5 people that we selected as the awardees this year. That's a pretty good success rate for you guys, so just so you know. I do the math in my head, I think that's 1 in 100. So this is just, the list is small, you're not going to see all of them, but somebody has to read all 500 papers. I did not read all 500 papers on my own. All of these people had a lot to do with doing that and reviewing them and rating them and determining them and what their rating ought to be and kind of letting the cream sort of rise to the top and selecting the ones that we selected. So I want to thank all of those folks at the NIH who spent time and effort to read papers, which I will tell you is actually quite fun. Reading 500 is not fun, but reading 5 or 10 or 15 is actually very interesting to see some of the recent research that's being funded. And I will mention here as well, the breadth and diversity of the research in the behavioral and social sciences funded by the NIH, I think, is really on display here today and happens over and over again as we do these presentations. All of us in our various institutes and centers kind of see, okay, this is what we do in child health, and this is what we do in aging, and this is what we do in cancer, and this is what we do in diabetes. When you come to something like this and you see the breadth of research that the NIH funds, I think it's really an important take-home message for all of us. Okay. I have a few sort of shameless announcements from the OBSR to finish things off. We recently revised our behavioral and social science research definition. It had been on the books since, I think, 1997. And it was an effort for us to just sort of both update it a bit from where it was previously, and also prepare us a little bit better to have a reference criteria from which we can then judge, is this grant a behavioral or social science research grant? So it allows us to be able to better track and monitor the behavioral and social science research that goes on at the NIH. None of that will surprise you or look particularly, I don't think we changed behavioral and social science definition in some major way and disrupted the world as we know it, but it will help us sort of do a better job at looking at this moving forward. That was our first sort of crowdsourcing effort. This is the current one that we have going on. Many people at the NIH and among our various stakeholders kept saying, what are the accomplishments in the behavioral and social sciences? And we had a few, and we actually have a fact sheet back from 2013, I think. I think my date's right, that listed some sort of accomplishments, some key ones. Diabetes prevention program, our reductions in risks of smoking cessation over the course of the last 20 or 30 years, et cetera. But we felt like we could expand on it, update it, revise it, and actually make it a much larger thing for people to be able to pull from, so that when your congressman or whoever it is says, well, what has the behavioral and social sciences accomplished in the last 20 years, you can pull from the site and be able to do that. This crowdsource is now open. It's open until July 31st, and just encourage anyone and everyone, and for you to encourage your networks to look at it and take an opportunity to sort of put in some additional information about accomplishments that we have going on. So that's that. And then a couple of things are coming up. There are 2 major events that our office does. This is one, the Matilda White Riley Awards every year. The other is the NIH Behavioral and Social Science Research Festival that we do every late fall, early winter. And it's an opportunity for us to look back on what we funded in the prior year and sort of take stock at what have we done and where do we need to go moving forward. So that's, in terms of save the date, is Friday, December the 6th, 2019. And then all of our contact information, the last thing on that slide is the one that's probably most important. If you don't subscribe to our newsletter, subscribe to our newsletter. We put on the things that are sort of funding and grant opportunities and funding announcements that have come up. We spotlight some research that was published in the last month on a regular basis, just to try to keep the field a little bit up to date on what's going on at the NIH. And then when some policy things come along that might be a little bit disconcerting that you might want to know about, we put those on there as well. So that's also important to do. So thank you all again. Thank you for your time. Thanks for being here. And once again, let's thank and recognize the recipients of the awardees this year.